Everyone. We'll get started here. Welcome to the remote planning board meeting for January 19th, 2021, being held via Zoom webinar. As we've done the last few meetings, when I call for public comment tonight, participants can use the raise hand function to be recognized. And if you joined via the Zoom webinar link, please click the icon labeled participants at the bottom of the computer screen. And then at the bottom of the window, click the button labeled raise hand. And we'll call your name that was listed when you entered the webinar. And remember, you'll need to unmute your microphone to make your comments. And if you join by telephone, you can raise and lower your hand by pressing *9 and mute and unmute yourself using *6. And if you do call by phone, I'll call on you by reading the last 4 digits of your phone number. So with that, we'll move to the roll call.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Thanks, Vince. Andy Mefford.
Present.
Andy Mefford's present. Dave Loomis. Dave Loomis is present. Micah Sewell.
Present.
Micah Sewell is present. Sean McCoy. Sean McCoy is present. Josh Schrader.
Present.
Josh Schrader is present. Caroline Lauer.
Present.
Caroline Lauer is present. Neva Hassanen.
Present.
Neva Hassanen's present. Toon Pham.
Present.
Toon Pham is present. Jim Bashand.
Present.
Jim Bashand is present. Shane Morrissey.
Present.
Shane Morrissey is present. Vince Caristo.
Present.
Vince Caristo is present. Mr. Chair, all regular members and 2 alternates are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next up is the minutes from the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes from January 5th or would like to make a motion to approve? Neva.
So moved.
Neva moves to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sean. So all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes passed unanimously. Next up is public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if anyone who has joined who'd like to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda, this would be the time. And if we could please get the instructions here up on the screen. I'll give a couple minutes for people to call in because of the lag on YouTube. So with that, I'll go on mute for a couple of minutes. Okay, I'm seeing no hands raised. Staff, do you see anyone in the lobby anywhere that I'm missing?
No, I do not see anyone.
Okay, very good. Then we will move on. Are there any staff announcements tonight? Okay, I don't believe there were any, so seeing no indications from staff, we'll move on to the public hearing for tonight, item 6.1, which is the cryptocurrency mining zoning regulations, which will be presented by several folks from Missoula County. So staff, if you could take it away, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Which I should know how to do by now.
Maybe while Diana's doing that, I just would like to introduce ourselves to you all. For some of you, it's been a long time, but it's good to see familiar faces. And for others of you I have not met before, it's very nice to meet you, though I wish it was in person. My name is Jenny Dixon. I'm a planner at Missoula County Community and Planning Services. And Diana and I both will be doing a joint presentation tonight on cryptocurrency mining zoning regulations. Diana is our sustainability program manager. We have a presentation that's probably going to exceed a half an hour. If you want to save your questions till the end, that might be the best, unless it seems very kind of pertinent at a specific time. Do raise your hand and we will try to recognize that. This is the first of 2 hearings. Obviously for zoning, it needs to go to the Planning Board, which is tonight, and then County Commissioners on February 11. With that, I'll let Diana take it away.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Great. As Jenny mentioned, my name is Diana Mineta. I am Sustainability Program Manager for Missoula County, and she and I will be presenting this information jointly. So to jump right in, here we go. Before we jump into the proposed zoning regulations, we thought it would be helpful to start with some background, since this is such a complex topic. To understand what cryptocurrency mining is, we first have to understand what a cryptocurrency is. A cryptocurrency is a digital currency that's maintained using something called a blockchain. A blockchain is a distributed ledger. Ledger meaning a list of transactions, and distributed meaning it's held and maintained not by a centralized entity like a government or a bank, but by many people or entities who may be anonymous and may be located anywhere in the world. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency and remains the most widely used, but today there are many other cryptocurrencies as well. When you buy something with a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, your transaction is grouped together with a bunch of other recent transactions into what's called a block. As shown in this diagram here, the block is sent out to all the participants who are involved in maintaining the blockchain. Once those participants approve that the block is valid, it's added to the blockchain and your transaction is confirmed. I want to take a closer look at step 4 because we're here today to talk about cryptocurrency mining, and step 4 is where the mining happens. To approve that the transactions included in the block are valid, those participants involved in the network compete to solve a complex mathematical puzzle associated with the block. There are no tricks to solving these puzzles. It's basically just a matter of using lots and lots of computational capacity, kind of like generating random numbers until you hit upon the solution. Whoever solves that puzzle first gets to add that new block of transactions to the blockchain and is rewarded with newly issued units of cryptocurrency. That reward is their motivation for doing this, for being involved. This process is called mining because it's how new currency enters into circulation. In the early years of Bitcoin, mining was something that people did on their home computers. But over time, as the price of Bitcoin increased, mining got more and more lucrative and more competitive. And people started doing it on a larger scale, using lots and lots of computers. Specialized computers were developed that just mine cryptocurrency and do nothing else. So what we've seen is really the centralization of mining into these large operations. So in a physical sense, a large cryptocurrency mining operation is thousands or tens of thousands of specialized computers that were built specifically for this purpose and run 24 hours a day, as well as cooling equipment to prevent the computers from overheating. One more note about terminology. The mining process that I've described is technically known as proof of work. It's important to know that while all cryptocurrencies use blockchains, they don't all use the same type of blockchain. In particular, they don't all use proof of work-based blockchains. The ones that don't involve mining. They just don't involve that type of calculation. They require negligible amounts of computational power and electricity compared to the proof of work system. In fact, some people believe that cryptocurrencies will eventually move away from the proof of work system altogether due to its inefficiencies and tremendous energy consumption, which I'll talk about in a minute, and move toward other systems. At that point, cryptocurrency mining would no longer be needed. So it's important to understand, I think, that you can have cryptocurrencies and you can certainly have blockchains more generally without having cryptocurrency mining operations. One question that's come up a number of times over the last couple of years as the county has researched this topic is whether there's a difference between cryptocurrency mining operations and more traditional data centers, and if so, what the difference is. What we learned researching this topic is that yes, there is a difference, and it's the result of the difference in function between these two types of facilities. The function of a cryptocurrency mining operation is to process data very quickly. They don't store any data, unlike a traditional data center, which both stores data and processes data. Storing data just requires a higher level of security, reliability, and redundancy than simply processing data. As a result, cryptocurrency mining operations are often sited in lightweight buildings like warehouses or storage facilities. They often use the type of open rack utility shelving that you see in the photo here on the left, which provides, of course, lower security and also less control of airflow than the cabinets that you'll see in a more traditional data center. And that's again because preserving the lifetime and the uptime of the equipment are lower priorities in a cryptocurrency mining operation, where equipment is often turned over frequently as faster models become available. So why are we talking about this in Missoula County, you might ask? This industry has shown a lot of interest in Montana over the past few years. There's no sort of database of where these facilities exist, so we don't have a complete list, but from news reports we can gather that there have been at least three or four large cryptocurrency mining facilities around the state and possibly more, and certainly the potential for many more. When we started looking into this topic in 2018, we talked to Northwestern Energy, and they told us that they had received inquiries from dozens of cryptocurrency mining firms that were interested in moving into Montana, and that if all those projects were developed, it would total up to 1,000 megawatts of new electrical load. That's versus the current electrical load across all of Northwestern Energy's Montana service territory of about 1,600 megawatts. So, excuse me, 1,600 current, up to 1,000 additional new. I don't think anyone ever expected all of those projects to come to fruition, but even if a small fraction of them did, that would still be really an unprecedented increase in electrical demand in the state. The most recent news along these lines is that a cryptocurrency mining firm appears to have purchased the Hardin coal-fired power plant, which otherwise was scheduled to shut down, to keep it operating in order to use that power solely to power a 100 megawatt cryptocurrency mining facility. I will also note that at the time Missoula County started looking into this issue, at the time the interim zoning regulations that Jenny will talk about were adopted, there was one large cryptocurrency mining facility operating in the county, in Bonner, but that facility has since gone out of business. It was touted, it did tout itself as being, when it started operating, the largest cryptocurrency mining facility in North America. So why are these facilities, why are these types of companies looking to Montana? Couple answers, the primary one being low cost of electricity. That's their primary operating cost. And so they're interested in anywhere in the world where they can get cheap power, essentially. And because of the way Montana's electric sector is regulated, they have the opportunity to negotiate cheap rates in the state. And the cool climate helps as well, because As I mentioned, you need cooling fans if you have so many computers operating 24/7 to prevent them from overheating. So the cool climate helps to reduce those cooling costs as well. Other parts of the country and the world that have seen a lot of cryptocurrency mining activity happening, some of those are noted here on this map. They include Eastern Washington State, which we'll see a little more about in a minute, as well as New York State, Canada, China, Russia, the Republic of Georgia, Iceland, and Sweden, among other places. I have mentioned the excessive energy consumption of cryptocurrency mining. Trying to quantify that, this graph looks globally, and it also looks just at Bitcoin, not at all cryptocurrencies. But this is a number that's tracked by the University of Cambridge. And as you can see on this graph, they estimate that today, Bitcoin mining uses somewhere around 100 terawatt hours of electricity per year. That number doesn't mean much, of course, on its own, but to put it in context, it's more energy than is used in many entire countries. It's approximately equivalent to the energy consumption of the Netherlands or of Argentina. The three lines there, by the way, are the range of uncertainty, because it's really hard to get a handle on these numbers, but the 100 terawatt hours is the middle line. That's their best guess, but the uncertainty range is anywhere from 40 terawatt hours to about 250 terawatt hours. And this number changes day to day, primarily based on the price of Bitcoin, which is also quite volatile and currently quite high. Another way to look at the energy consumption question is to compare the energy used to process a single transaction. So if I were to go buy a slice of pizza with Bitcoin versus buying it with my credit card, how much energy is involved in processing that? According to estimates, as you can see here, there's really no comparison. A single Bitcoin transaction uses as much energy as hundreds of thousands of these transactions. So if the technology here cooperates with us, shoot, I don't know why we're seeing two things here, but let's just try this. We're going to try to show this 7-minute video clip. This was a CBS News feature a year or two ago, a couple years ago, about the impacts of cryptocurrency mining in Wenatchee, Washington. And it illustrates some of the things I've been talking about, as well as some of the other local impacts that have been experienced from cryptocurrency mining in communities that have seen a lot of this activity. So I'm not sure why I'm seeing sort of two things on my screen here, but I am going to try to play it. And Jenny or someone else, I can't actually see the thumbnail videos of you, so don't just gesture at me, but speak up if it doesn't work or you can't hear the audio, and let me know that so we can adjust our plans here.
I'm driving into a small town about 3 hours east of Seattle called Wenatchee, and as its apple-shaped sign shows, it's known as the apple capital of the world. There are rolling hills of apple orchards here because it's been a huge industry. With an economy tied to a stable fruit industry, Wenatchee has a slow pace of life, and the 40,000 who call it home have seen little change here over the years. But recently, a new industry began surfacing, and the changes came quickly.
All right, so this is your baby.
Yeah.
She's loud.
This was a long time coming. Yeah, she's a bit loud. You want to try to pull this door open? There's a few fans.
Oh, it's the air being pulled in?
Yeah, don't let go of the door. Just smash me. Come on in. Yeah.
It's like a hand dryer.
Yeah, it's like, every one of these things is like a 1,000-watt hair dryer. So there'll be 1,000 of those hair dryers in this pod. So that's quite a lot of heat. Go try it at home.
These fans are operating 24/7 to cool endless rows of computer servers, each one feverishly working to mine cryptocurrency. This is how digital currency is made. Every time someone uses cryptocurrency to pay for something, it sets off a flurry of activity. Servers like these work to verify and process that transaction, each one racing to authenticate the exchange of digital money through complex calculations. For doing this work, the machines are rewarded with new cryptocurrency. This is what's called mining.
So each of these small machines is making you roughly $1,500
worth of Bitcoin
every year.
every year. Yeah.
This entire wall is the future, according to you.
Future of money right here.
Today, Dave's machines are essentially printing money. Like many locals here, he started with just a few small machines. But with the help of investors, he's scaled up significantly. He now runs Gigawatt, which continues to grow rapidly. He plans to have 22 of his pods completed by the end of the year. In Wenatchee, everyone is trying to make a buck from mining, from locals with a few machines in their basements to other large-scale facilities like Dave's.
How many of these fans do you need?
I think for this site, we ordered over 600 of them. Now, these are industrial fans. They would be used in something like big chicken farms.
And now they're keeping Bitcoin mining machines cool.
Yeah.
Mining machines burn through transactions as fast as possible, so powering them and even cooling them down is half the game.
Now you see all the plugs, all the outlets. How much power does this facility use compared to like a typical building?
Well, so our pods use 1.5 megawatts. That's typically associated with like 600 homes.
So just this one facility is sucking up as much energy as 6 homes.
No, 600.
100 homes.
Right here in this space.
I mean, that's incredible when you think
Hard to
about it.
believe, yeah.
600 houses, turn the lights on and off, television, the fan is as much energy as this wall right here.
Powering all of this would cost a fortune in most places, but Wenatchee has a competitive advantage. The Columbia River.
This is pretty incredible to see up close, and this is the exact reason so many crypto mining enthusiasts want to be here. Cheap hydroelectric power.
Steve Wright manages the public utility, which runs 2 dams on the Columbia River, providing cheap power to the county and beyond. This region provides power for much of the western U.S.
What we have seen more recently are industries like cryptocurrency that have come to the region for the same reasons that aluminum came here. Low cost, reliable electricity. We had a bunch of storage containers that people were trucking in on the back of trucks. They would set them up, they would have racks of computers inside it, and they would ask, where are the jumper cables so I can hook up to the power system? We have requests for service that would double the usage here in the county. And we're trying to figure out, how are we going to deal with that and what the implications would be for the people who live here.
Because access to cheap power is key, miners are racing to set up shop anywhere in the world they can find low rates. Cold climates are also preferred to help reduce cooling costs. But the race for cheap power is not without problems. Andrew Wendell, Customer Service Director for the utility, showed me why the concern is more than simply not having enough power.
So I can already hear the hum.
Yeah.
This is the Bitcoin mining operation underway.
Yeah. So a miner, if they had the energy source, could literally set up anywhere in town. Would you want to live next to one of these?
Yeah, it's an eyesore.
It's an
Looks
eyesore.
more like something out of the Mad Max movie.
Yeah. Not just the aesthetics, but also the noise. There's a lot of noise. They really do belong in an industrial setting.
This has been popping up all over town.
This is popping up, and it gives us a bit of a concern because quite literally, you could have a tractor trailer come in and load this thing up and move it out literally overnight. And so it just begs the question from a utility who's providing and building the infrastructure to support these, how long is our investment? When we build those We're building them for 40, 50, 60 years. This doesn't look like that long term.
Not only is Andrew worried about miners abandoning Wenatchee and leaving behind expensive new power connections, but some mining setups also test the very limits of that infrastructure.
But put your hand on the back here and feel how hot that is. It's
You can't
really
keep your
hot.
hand on
You're
there.
not going to keep your hand on. What we have here is a standard residential home, but this shed, about 10 by 10 here, off to the side with the vents, that's full of cryptocurrency mining operation. So this cable and the transformers that was feeding the operation was seeing a very high load factor.
And this is the actual cable that
This
was
is the
underground?
actual cable, right?
This plastic insulation breaks down because there's so much heat.
There's so much heat, it can't dissipate the heat, so the insulation breaks down, and then the cables go phase to phase, and when they go phase to phase, they combust, they arc, and they can start a fire. And that's what happened in this handhole here, is a fire started. The bottom line is that when you mix the cryptocurrency mining with traditional residential load, if you don't have things built and designed appropriately, you're going to have some problems. In this part of the country, wildfire can spread and burn, literally hundreds of homes. And so, we take that very, very seriously.
All right. Oh, shoot. I hope that you could all see that, and I'm sorry, I don't know why, at least on my screen, a little bit of it was cut off, but I think the content got through there. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny now, who will talk more about the process that the county has gone through with regard to cryptocurrency mining and the proposed zoning regulations under consideration today.
Thank you, Diana. So I wanted to start with a little bit of history of how we have arrived at this point. Some of you may have been tracking this for the last couple of years. The commissioners really started to become aware of possible impacts from cryptocurrency mining that they may not have been aware of previously in late 2017. And we, at their request, conducted several public hearings in 2018, primarily to learn more and take comment from Missoulians and people in the industry. The commissioners didn't take any action in 2018, but in 2019 determined that there was an emergency situation that they were obligated to respond to. State law sets out some provisions for how to go about adopting and implementing interim zoning, and that is what they did in April of 2019. It was adopted for 1 year, and then a year later, which would have been just eight months ago, in April of 2020, they extended that interim zoning for 1 additional year. That zoning is scheduled to lapse or expire in April of this year, which is why we have started our hearings on this now. The commissioners are interested in entertaining comment and input on whether to extend that zoning or to let it lapse. Next slide, please, Diana. Thank you. So when they first adopted the interim zoning in 2019, we took a look at what were the impacts that they were most concerned about, or that seemed to be, generating the most concern. The ones that really rose to the top had to do with noise and finding suitable locations for these facilities, their use of energy, and disposal of the hardware that you saw in the video, which can be pretty extensive, and doing that in a way that complies with DEQ and safe disposal as far as environmental impacts to water quality. So The Missoula County Growth Policy has a number of guiding principles. This one, I think, sums up where the commissioners felt like their responsibility lie. The responsibility lays in making decisions that are environmentally sound, but also fiscally responsible and supportive of healthy communities over the long term. Next slide, please. So these are a few of the communities around North America that have adopted either through their local government regulations, zoning to regulate cryptocurrency mining, or utilities have confronted some issues and regulated cryptocurrency mining energy use. Whether it be the safety and reliability of that electrical system or other aesthetic or noise reasons. And so this is is compatible with the map that Diana showed you earlier of those cool climates in the northern part of the United States and up in Canada are really the most attractive, the ones with the hydropower. So, go ahead, Diana, next slide. So the proposed zoning is, first of all, at this point, is proposed as permanent zoning. It's proposed to apply countywide on zoned and unzoned land as an overlay zone, and it would not be applied within the city limits. This is simply county zoning. I believe that we do have someone from the city's climate and energy team that may provide some comment today, and that was also in your public comment. But we have obviously made the city aware of what we're doing, but they are not a partner in this at this time. The cryptocurrency mining zoning would allow for this use under 4 conditions. One is that it only be allowed in industrial zoning districts. We have light and heavy industrial zones in Missoula County, and I'll show you a map of those areas in just a moment. If the cryptocurrency mine is within 500 feet of a residential zoning district or residential use, it would need to be reviewed as a conditional or special use. And that simply means some additional development standards that would make it integrate better into wherever it's selected to locate. And particularly if there are residences around, the special use review would require a public hearing that would let people comment on what they thought about it or felt the impacts may be to them personally in that unique situation. The third requirement through the zoning is that the e-waste is disposed with a DEQ licensed recycler, which we do have one in town, as I understand it. And the company that was here previously had indicated that that's what they were doing and that was not problematic. The fourth requirement is that the cryptocurrency mine purchase or develop new renewable energy to offset 100% of their electricity consumption. And Diana's going to go into that a little bit more in just a moment and explain why that is important and why the concept of additionality is really key to effective development of cryptocurrency mining using renewable energy. I would also mention we, as a result of the zoning district, will need to add 2 new definitions, cryptocurrency mining. As Diana explained earlier, it's not a really easy concept to wrap your head around, but we have a definition we'd like to include in the zoning along with a definition of renewable energy so that users will know what qualifies as renewable energy. The let's see, I think, go ahead to the next slide, please, Diana. I think it's the zoning map. Yeah, so this is just kind of meant to be a squint and see what, the color that you want to be looking for as where these could be located. If I'm oops, I think it's the peach, the light pink or peach color are the county industrial zoning districts. The gray is the city, so that's off the table as far as this conversation goes. But in the county, the industrial zones are in the light pink peach area. And this is just, as you can see up in the upper left-hand corner, is just a small area of the county that where we have zoning. Outside of that, there are some other kinds of zoning districts, but none of it is industrial. And so to locate one of these anywhere else throughout the county, the property would have to be zoned for industrial use. And therefore right now nowhere out of this map would qualify. I would also mention, go to the next slide for me, please. I guess before we get started on this issue of renewable energy, I would also mention, and it was in the staff report, that to our knowledge, there are no cryptocurrency mines operating in Missoula County right now. At the time we did this interim zoning, there was at least one, and I think at the early stages there was more than one in operation. But the ramifications of that are that this zoning district will apply to any cryptocurrency mine that, if it's adopted, that may come up and ask for a permit to operate in Missoula County. I think that's what I have, and we'll turn it back over to Diana to explain the renewable energy.
Thank you, Jenny. So as Jenny mentioned, one of the conditions that the proposed zoning regulations would require of any new or expanded cryptocurrency mining operation is to develop or purchase sufficient new renewable energy to offset 100% of the electricity consumed by the cryptocurrency mining operation. And it further goes on to say, well, what it says on the screen here is that to meet this condition, the cryptocurrency mining operation must be able to establish that their actions will introduce new renewable energy onto the electrical grid beyond what would have been developed otherwise. So I want to talk just a little bit about this distinction that's being drawn in the proposed zoning regulations between new renewable energy and implicitly existing renewable energy, and why it is an important distinction. So first, I want to be clear that requiring the use of new versus existing renewable energy isn't intended to be a judgment about the relative value of new versus existing renewable energy. We're very fortunate to have the existing renewable energy resources that we do in Montana. On average, the electricity that we use in the state in Northwestern Energy Service Territory is about 60% clean, renewable, most of that from hydropower dams, as well as some wind and a little bit of solar energy. And that's a great starting point. But given the urgency of addressing climate change and the fact that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us that we need to phase out fossil fuel combustion entirely in order to avoid catastrophic change, we need to go beyond where we are now. In 2019, Missoula County and the city of Missoula jointly adopted a goal of 100% clean electricity for the Missoula urban area by 2030. 60% is a great starting point, but we have to go further, and we've made that commitment to go further. So what happens when a new large energy user comes into the state and buys power from one of our existing renewable energy resources? Assuming that that clean energy was previously being used by other people, whether they're in state or out of state, whether they were residential or commercial or industrial customers, when that new large user comes in, some of those buyers will need to shift onto another source of generation. There's no guarantee that that other source will be renewable. It might well be coal or natural gas. So back in 2019, when the interim zoning regulations were first being developed, we struggled with how to reconcile the extremely high energy consumption of this industry with the imperative to address climate change and the commitments the county had made to do so. And what we came up with is this condition that new or expanded cryptocurrency mining is fine as long as it brings new renewable energy onto the grid along with it and meets the other conditions that Jenny described. I do want to point out that this distinction between new and existing renewables is not something that we invented here in Missoula County. It's a well-established principle among companies who think about these things. For example, 78 large corporations have signed on to something called the Corporate Renewable Energy Buyers Principle. Those corporations are shown here. There are 6 principles that they've signed on to, which lay out what they're looking for from utilities and power providers when they seek to purchase renewable energy. And one of those principles is, I quote here, access to new projects that reduce emissions beyond business as usual. So these companies are making the distinction between new and existing renewable energy because they want to be sure that their use of renewable energy actually makes a difference. As another example, Google, one of over 150 corporations that have committed to achieving 100% renewable energy. And in fact, Google is one that has already achieved that goal. And its report on how it did that includes the statement on the screen here. To ensure that Google is the driver for bringing new clean energy onto the grid, we insist that all projects be additional. This means that we seek to purchase energy from not yet constructed generation facilities. So again, making that distinction between new and existing renewable energy. And finally, I want to address really briefly how a company that wanted to engage in cryptocurrency mining in the county and to do that to meet the renewable energy condition could do so, given the electricity sector regulations in our state. We have identified 5 potential pathways a company could pursue to meet this condition. They are on-site renewable energy, a physical power purchase agreement, virtual power purchase agreement, a green tariff, and renewable energy certificates under certain conditions, specifically if additionality can be demonstrated. I'm not going to go into detail on these, though I'm certainly happy to delve into it if the planning board members have questions, but just for the sake of time, I won't explain them all unless that's the case. But I do want to note that this is not intended to be an exhaustive list. Renewable energy technologies, policies, and markets are all evolving rapidly, and companies could well identify other options not on this list that would meet the renewable energy condition. And in addition, not all of these options would be available to every company in every situation. So that's the reason that we didn't include this level of detail in the language of the proposed zoning regulations themselves. We didn't want to be too prescriptive in that regard. And I think I'm now going to turn it back over to Jenny to conclude the staff presentation.
Thank you. What you have, this last slide here is the staff recommended motion. As is probably evident, we are recommending that the county adopt permanent zoning relative to cryptocurrency mining, identical to what was adopted as their interim zone for 2 years in a row. As you probably know, your role as planning board is to using the materials that we provided you. We gave you a draft of the proposed regulations that should be in your packet as attachment A. You can recommend adoption, that the commissioners adopt those as is. You can make recommended changes, or you can recommend that they not adopt them. I do want to make clear for anyone, any attendees from the public, that there will be another public hearing on this. Tonight is not a decision, an action. And also, just to summarize real briefly, we have and had an obligation through state law and our county zoning regulations to notify people by mail, through posters, through legal ads. We put out a newsletter article and we did a television interview, and so we've attempted to do all kinds of outreach and let people know about this and provide ways for people to ask questions and provide comment. And as you probably saw in your packet that was delivered last week and then supplemented again today, there were 10 comment letters, some of which I imagine people are here today. I think at least one person wants to comment and provide comment that also submitted it in writing. So if you have questions about what's in attachment A, what I can do, if you don't have it handy in your packet, I have on the next couple of slides, we can kind of show you what those 2 definitions are and the gist of the zoning, but hopefully you have access to that attachment A and can ask questions of, if you want to make changes to those regulations. And with that, I will be quiet and let you all deliberate and take comment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jenny and Diana. That was really informative. Thank you. So the next part of this will be public comment. So we have quite a few folks who've joined as attendees and have indicated the desire to speak. And there's at least one person who's been in the chat function who's having trouble joining as an attendee. Heather, Donna, have you been able to track that conversation as it's been happening? If you could, they didn't list a name, but
Yes, I attempted to paste the link for them to participate as an attendee into the chat where the Q&A is, and I'm not sure, I don't see them in the attendees list yet, but hopefully they're able to use that.
Okay, great, Heather. I see now that you posted the link. Thank you for doing that. Okay, and I will just say, so Bert Caldwell, you are showing as a participant, and we will call you in time. So for everyone who's an attendee, if you'd like to speak, if you could please use the raise hand function. If you're joining by computer, click raise hand. If you join by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. And just so I know that not everyone who is an attendee necessarily wants to speak. So I'll give a minute for folks to find the raise hand function if you'd like to speak, and then I'll call on you by the name that you entered, and we'll give you a chance to speak. Okay, so we'll start off here. The first name on my list is McKay. I hope I pronounced that right. So I will allow you to speak, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And if you're viewing the meeting on a different device than you're talking, please make sure to mute that device, or we'll have an echo and won't be able to hear you talk. So with that, McKay, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Can people hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, I don't know how to get the camera going, but I'll skip that part. Anyway, so thanks for giving me the chance to talk. I've been following this for most of the time it's been going on, and I'll try and be as brief as possible, though I do have a lot of thoughts about this. Sorry, my kid's distracting me. Here, just give me a sec, buddy. So, I don't think much thought has been given to, the benefits of what is going on here. Obviously a lot of things consume electricity. You could, for example, Christmas lights in the United States consume about as much energy per year as the Bitcoin network does. That's one example. A Keno machine, which there's about 3,000 of them in Missoula County, uses about a quarter of one Bitcoin mining rig. So I'm not sure how many there were at Hyperblock, but that's probably another big electricity consumption. So there's a lot of things that consume energy, and just because they do doesn't make them bad. And from what I've seen in the last couple of years, I don't think many people have put a lot of thought into why all this energy is being used. And, in the United States, and people with the privilege of having a banking system and a fairly strong currency, it may be a little harder to understand why this is important stuff. But the proof of work algorithm has actually solved one of the biggest problems in digital money there is, and that would be the double spending problem. How do you know if the money you have in a digital account isn't getting spent twice? And the way that problem is solved now, which, Diana, your point about Visa and Bitcoin is way off, and I'll explain why. The way that problem is solved now is a huge financial infrastructure. So Visa doesn't, process transactions alone. It needs a Chase Bank. It needs First Interstate Bank. It needs infrastructure. It needs armored cars. It needs ATMs. It needs physical buildings. And the estimate of power consumption of that financial infrastructure, which you need to do a Visa transaction, is about 500 times that of the Bitcoin network. So if you think about it in that way, Bitcoin can actually be a much greener technology than what we're currently using. Another thing is that it can be situated next to a dam, for example. So you don't need to be plumbing electricity all over the place to make this stuff work. So there are about 2 billion people in the world who don't have access to banks. And if we want to build out that infrastructure, you're looking at another, 300 to 500 times the amount of energy that you would need when you could just use the Bitcoin network. And so again, there's people in the United States that don't think this is a great thing, but there's people in Zimbabwe and Greece and other countries who have disastrous monetary policies, who have seen their currencies deflated into the ground. And Bitcoin is very popular in those types of countries because, you know, when you're trying to go buy bread and the next day it costs 20 times more than it did the day before because your government has completely screwed your currency, then Bitcoin is valuable. When you're a political dissident in Iran and you have no way to connect to the greater financial infrastructure and you're put on lockdown by some, you know, authoritarian regime, people have been able to get out of their country with some of their wealth intact due to the way Bitcoin functions and how you can make a seed phrase to memorize how to get your funds back.
Okay,
So,
you're just over 3 minutes. If you could finish up, please.
well, I mean, I could talk for 30 minutes, and I've been thinking about this for 2 years, and I've written a series of articles that I haven't been able to put out. But if you just give me like a couple more minutes, I will wrap.
Everyone has 3 minutes, McKay. So if you could, you know, make a closing statement, and we'll move on to the next person.
Okay. Well, anyway, it restores the peer-to-peer nature of currency. You know, you can transact without a PayPal or a Chase Bank, you know, not only raking money from each transaction, but we've also had problems in Missoula where, you know, some of the people selling CBD products, for example, were put on a blacklist. So when you stop Bitcoin from happening, then you have situations where payment processors get a say who gets to send money to who. Throughout human history, all transactions have been person to person. And now, you know, with the way things are now with credit cards and debit cards, we've taken that and we put about 50 people in the middle who get to not only take money from each transaction, but get to say who gets to pay who and who doesn't. And anyway, I just think it's a terrible idea. I think the zoning is fine, but I think that requiring crypto mines to have new renewable energy, if you applied that to any other industry, it would kill it. And so if you say it's not a ban, it really is. I mean, effectively, you wouldn't ask casino owners to put solar panels on their roofs to run their casinos. And so I think the societal benefit greatly outweighs the cost. And the final thing I will say is
McKay, I'm gonna have to cut you off there.
One more thing, one last thing, I promise.
I'm sorry, McKay. We're over 5 minutes, so thank you very much for your comment. And we're gonna move on to the next person. Next person, before we move to the next person, I'll say there are a few people who've been on the chat who indicated they wanted to speak, namely Bert Caldwell, and iPad, and a couple other folks who don't have their hand raised. So if you could please try and raise your hand. I know the ones who've indicated to me, like Bert and iPad, but other folks who would like to talk, if your hand isn't raised, I'm not going to call on you unless you indicate in the chat otherwise. So with that, next up is Gary Matson. So you have 3 minutes, Gary, and please remember to mute the device that you're listening to if it's not on your computer, and so we don't have any feedback. So with that, you have the floor. Gary, are you there?
Yeah, I think so. Am I there?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I don't see my little box in Zoom like I usually do, so I'm kind of confused. But anyway, I have sent in a written comment, and so my name is Gary Matson, and my last name is spelled M-A-T-S-O-N. And I've submitted written comments already, and I just wanted to add a short note. There are those who believe that the county's temporary zoning restriction was unfairly applied to Bonner's Bitcoin mine because it added requirements that were not included when the company began operations. The new requirements caused financial harm to the mine operators because they could not expand as planned. The mine in Bonner started in April of 2017, and during the following years, the urgency of addressing climate change became more clear to our local governments, and in April of 2019, 100% clean electricity resolution was passed. At the same time, it became clear that the Vaughan Bitcoin mine operation was harmful to county residents because of its extremely excessive energy consumption and very small socioeconomic benefit. The county's reaction to this awareness of harm to residents prompted the change in zoning regulation. Whenever an operation is underway and it becomes evident that its activities are causing harm, it is absolutely appropriate that the county take action to limit the source of harm. So thank you for this opportunity to add that note.
Great, thank you for your comment, Gary. So next we will have Chris Rowe. If you could please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. So you have the floor now. Hi, Chris.
Hey there, this is Chris Rowe. I'm the chair of the City of Missoula's Energy and Climate Team. Our role with the city is to assist the city in meeting its carbon neutrality goals and its 100% clean electricity goals. This particular team, the Energy and Climate Team, has been around for over about 15 years. And so we're active in a number of ways within the city to move those goals forward. So one of the questions briefly is why are we working on this county event? And part of the answer to that is this consolidated planning board, the joint 100% clean electricity initiative, where we're seeing is a large effort between the city and the county to jointly work toward a number of common goals across the board, but also specifically toward climate change. So our team at our last regular meeting, we passed a resolution in support of the 100% clean electricity. The approach that the county is taking toward cryptocurrency mining. Specifically, I'll read our resolution aloud here. I'll go rather quickly. I know I only have 3 minutes. Missoula Energy and Climate Team Resolution 2021-1, resolution to support the proposed Missoula County February 2021 cryptocurrency mining zoning regulations, specifically dealing with item 3, a requirement to develop and purchase sufficient new renewable energy to offset 100% of the electricity consumed to meet this condition. The cryptocurrency mining operation must be able to establish that their actions will introduce new renewable energy into the electrical grid beyond what would have developed otherwise. We got our wherefores basically dealing with the city's carbon neutrality goals and the 100% clean electricity goals. We also added a whereas where it says a recent study estimated the total energy usage by Bitcoin is approximately 45.8 terawatt hours per year. This is a slightly different number than the one Diana presented, but in the same vein. Resulting estimated annual carbon emissions between 22 and 23 metric tons of carbon equivalent or comparable carbon generation to the city, to the generation of the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So now therefore be it resolved, the Missoula Energy and Climate Team hereby supports the adoption and implementation of the proposed February 2021 cryptocurrency mining regulation. And then we added an additional thing we want this group to consider in its deliberations. Further, to consider including in item 3 a requirement to include an offset for the electricity consumed from the upstream manufacture of the hardware components required for cryptocurrency mining. Not an easy thing to establish, but one of the things we saw in the videos that Diana showed us was that these guys use a huge amount of hardware, and it has to be new hardware, and they use it hard, and it's replaced pretty frequently. And so there's a big carbon imprint related to the hardware, not just the consumption of the energy once the hardware is plugged in. So we ask you to consider that as well.
You're over
in
4
your-
minutes. If you could finish up your talk,
Sure,
please.
Vince. So I appreciate the time today, and I wish you luck in your deliberations. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment, Chris. Next up, we will have Jason Vaughan. Jason, you have 3 minutes, and the floor is yours.
All right, can you guys hear me all right?
I can. Welcome.
Okay, great. Hi. Many of you know me. My name is Jason Vaughan. I was the site manager for Project Spokane and Hyperblock, the data center out in Vaughan, Montana. And we had to shut down May 13th of last year. A large part of that was due to the zoning that was enacted and the amount of money that we lost having to cancel the expansion that we were already in the middle of. So I've lost a 6-figure job over this, so it's a pretty big deal for me. But some of the things that I wanted to talk about is that with all electronics, including Bitcoin equipment, networks, electricity, everything becomes more efficient over time. You have to allow that stuff to develop. You have to allow for this equipment to become more efficient. It's the same thing with phones. We buy cell phones on a yearly basis now, or a new model comes out and everything, or a new computer or a new TV. It's not just Bitcoin that's producing new stuff all the time, but all the new equipment that comes out is more efficient. So the Bitcoin network is becoming more efficient over time. And there's some proof to that. And a couple of questions I have is that I strongly disagree with fully enacting this zoning. The whole reason the emergency zoning was put in place was to give you more time to research the effects of it and all of that. But honestly, Diana and Jenny, like, I see the same exact presentations that we've had over the last 3 years over this. I haven't seen any new information brought in from you guys. And it's a little frustrating that you're about to permanently enact this zoning when I don't see any research done that justify the reason of doing so in the first place. Just a couple of facts that I want to point out. On June 14th, it was when the very first hearing that we had, Bitcoin was $6,500. The amount of transactions on that day, and average around that time, was 178,000 transactions a day. The terawatt hours per year used by the Bitcoin network on that day and around that time were 70 terawatt hours. Today, Bitcoin is at $35,000 of value. It is over 5 times the value. The transactions per day have nearly doubled, not quite, but nearly doubled. The power usage over that time has gone from 70 to 72 terawatt hours per year. Not this exponential growth like you guys think, because you don't understand how the network works and how difficulty is adjusted depending on the amount of transactions, the speed of the network, and everything. There's a lot more to it that you guys miss in all of your presentations that you do. I would love to sit down with you guys and give you some more information or talk about it at some point in time, because I still believe extremely big and long-term of cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. And, you know, I know we all want to see a cleaner planet and more renewable energy and all of that stuff brought on. But part of the issue I see is Northwest Energy is a roadblock with that. I mean, you need to not be going after businesses that are buying stuff on the open market legally. We were buying our power legally. We got all the permits and everything from you guys. You guys gave us permission to do this, and then you changed the rules in the middle. Go after the way the energy is produced and accepted. You know, go after Northwest Energy. Go after closing the coal mines. You can't, you know, go after a company who's just buying something on the open market legally. So,
Jason, if you could wrap up your over 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the time. again, I would love to sit down with Diana or Jenny at some point in the future and discuss this, because I think there's a lot to it that you guys are missing. And I know you guys have done a bunch of research, but I feel it's kind of been one-sided, and I just like to offer the other side and maybe give some more insight to it. So I appreciate you guys' time, and go Grizz.
Thank you for your comment, Jason. Next, we have Bert Caldwell. You have 3 minutes and you have the floor. Hi, Bert.
Yeah, got it. And I won't need 3 minutes. I got real quick, and it has more to do with the way that the zoning permit is written. I submitted written comments, I think through Jenny. Did you put those in for me? Yes, you did. Okay. I think one thing is missing in the definition of cryptocurrency is the use of the high use of computer servers and energy used, so that generates reason for the rest of the policy. The second thing is that section on intent doesn't mention intent anywhere. I told Jenny I would submit a suggested paragraph changing that, but all it basically it gets into it establishes things and defines things, but it doesn't have any intent whatsoever. So I will put that up for to Jenny in the future. And the other one is Jenny did a real good job of answering my questions about enforcement and whether or not the state government could override. So if any of you have any questions or have you thought about that, talk to Jenny. She's got really good answers, and I'm done.
Great. Thank you, Bert. So next we have Steve Nelson. You're under the name iPad here. He indicated that you'd like to speak, so I'm going to give you the floor here for 3 minutes. Steve, are you there?
Wait a minute. Now can you hear me?
I can, yes. Welcome.
Okay, I'll go quickly. My name's Steve Nelson. I'm one of the owners of the Bonner Mill site. Just a couple things that I want to talk about. One, I think you should let this lapse, but I think it set a terrible precedent by because Jason Vaughan mentioned it, but there's a concept legally talks about detrimental reliance. And when somebody comes in and does everything they're supposed to do, whether you like them or don't like them, you shouldn't in the middle of the stream decide that they can't do it that way. And basically they said, you got to stop now, you can't grow. And because they can't grow, then they went bankrupt. When they went bankrupt, and I can tell you because I was there, you never know what the unintended consequences are. But we, as a company, I'm telling you, we're within a sliver of going bankrupt, losing everything and having to shut the whole place down out there. And I went through 3 or 4 months of the most stressful time of my life because of that. And I think you're fortunate that Hyperblock did go bankrupt. They probably should have sued because I think they had a pretty good case. But the point is if somebody comes in and I think if you set this precedent, say Google wants to go out to Frenchtown and set up a fabulous $300 million data center out there. Well, they may look at this and say, well, gee whiz, they just come in and they'll tell us halfway through after we spend all this money that we can't do it because we're using excessive amounts of energy. There may be a lot of things to do with the data center of Google or whatever out there that might be quite good for Missoula County. I get it about the, emergency zoning is there for a reason. Emergency zoning is there because of an emergency. That's an imminent emergency. It's not something that we're talking about climate change. That's not imminent. It may be in some people's minds, but I think that it's not a great way to govern. Go ahead, do your new zoning regulations and do whatever, but I think you ought to let this lapse. I appreciate the county. The county commissioners have a difficult job. I don't envy. It's difficult. I understand all that. But on the other hand, once you allow somebody to follow all the rules and then let them and then change the rules in the middle of the stream, it's just not the way to go about business. So that's all I got to say. Thank you very much. I was under my 3 minutes.
You were very, very good. Okay. So I don't see any other hands raised in the attendee list. I think I'd like to give a minute or two for folks who are watching and want to speak, but haven't been able to find their hand raise button. To find the hand raise button or press *6 on their phone. If you're having trouble and you need to call out on the chat function as well, please do that. So make sure we'll make sure to get you a chance to speak. So with that, I'll give a minute or so for folks to figure that out.
Okay, I know.
I think this is gonna be over pretty soon. I'll go get some food, okay?
Okay, with that, I haven't seen any additional hands raised, so we will close the public comment portion of this item and move on to questions from staff members. So in this section of the hearing, it's traditional for staff members to ask questions of, for planning board members rather, to ask questions of staff members. And so, namely, sometimes it's traditional for planning board members to raise questions that were raised by public commenters or any questions that you might have of your own. So I see a hand raised from Caroline. If you could kick us off, please.
Not a question, but I have to recuse myself. I noticed in reviewing the materials that the ED of Climate Smart, Amy Sillenberg, submitted comments weighing in on the issue. I wasn't a part of it, but just to play it safe and in an abundance of caution, I will recuse myself for tonight.
Okay, Caroline, I think you work for Climate Smart Missoula, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I'm a program director and I work, haven't worked much on cryptocurrency at all, but since it was submitted on behalf of Climate Smart Missoula, I think best to recuse myself.
Okay, great. I think so, yeah, thinking it through. I mean, if Climate Smart Missoula has established a position on the issue and that person is your boss, then it sort of ties your hands. So,
yeah.
All right, thanks for doing that, Caroline. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, I'll still listen in though, because I like to learn more about cryptocurrency.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for sticking around. I don't know who raised first, but we'll go with Jim.
Vince, are alternates allowed to ask questions?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Question for staff. I noticed your definition clearly defines crypto mining. Was there any consideration given to just broadening the definition so that this change doesn't only apply just to crypto mining? It seems to me that the larger issue could be around energy consumption. And I just wonder if you could comment on that. Do you want me to direct that to somebody in particular, or?
I can answer a little bit, and then Diana may want to jump in as well. Sorry, I was just taking a minute to unmute. A couple things. We did look at, well, first of all, blockchain. There's lots of different kinds of blockchain, and what we looked at was this proof of work that requires kind of this iterative process of number generation that uses so much energy. And we did consider, as part of our study and investigation over the last year or two, should this apply to not just cryptocurrency mining, but any kind of proof of work blockchain, which we haven't really seen any evidence of, not at least not in Missoula County. There has been some other kinds of blockchain operations that we've wondered if they were proof of work, tracking art sales and other kinds of things like that. And so we'd entertain the idea of applying the zoning to all proof of work blockchain operations. But because we don't really see clear evidence that that's happening, we kept it confined to cryptocurrency mining. We also looked at other high energy users in Missoula County. And, did this make sense to apply to other types of operators besides cryptocurrency? And because of the disparity between the amount of energy that was contracted for the cryptocurrency mining operations that were going on at that time, and expansions that were planned, versus other industries in Missoula and how much energy they were contracted for, it was so this difference was so vast that we did not recommend applying it to other industries in Missoula. Diana, do you have anything that you recall from that you want to add, or did I get it covered?
I think you covered that well, Jenny. I guess the other consideration is we were investigating a couple of years back with interim zoning and considering whether to try to, expand or consider similar regulations that would apply to any industry that used more than a certain amount of electricity. It's very hard to get information on how much electricity businesses use. And so, being able to identify who those were, again, other than in specific cases, companies that are choice customers of Northwestern Energy, that information is posted online. But other than that, we know cryptocurrency mining by its nature uses a lot of energy, like Jenny said, used at that time just many times more than any other industry in the state. And that's why the regulations were designed in the way that they were.
Can I do a quick follow-up to that? Did you do any research on large institutions that are using blockchain technology beyond just cryptocurrency? So all of the top banks in the United States are using some form of blockchain, which requires a large amount of energy from their data server environments, server farms. Any research in that area? I know they're not probably planning to come to Montana or Missoula, but you never know.
Yeah, great question. And we did do quite a bit of research a couple of years back on the different types of blockchain applications. As Jenny mentioned, as you mentioned also, Jim, blockchains are used and have potential to be used for really a broad array of purposes beyond cryptocurrency. What we learned is that many of those, for banking, for a lot of other purposes, those are not utilizing the proof of work system. Those are permissioned blockchains in many cases, where it's not sort of anonymous people all over the world that are involved in authorizing or validating those transactions. They're private blockchains, they're permissioned blockchains, and in those cases, the proof of work system and therefore mining is just not applicable. It doesn't apply, and so that's why we felt pretty confident based on the information we were able to gather at the time that this regulation basically had nothing to do with those types of blockchain applications because they're not proof of work and therefore don't involve the mining process.
Okay, Dave Loomis. Dave, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Vince. I have a few questions, some of which have been answered, and I appreciate all the work so far. And this, we were shown briefly a map of potential locations of these kinds of uses. I what I wondered is not only where they are, but how many acres. So what's the potential of the use and build out of these intensive uses? There was something else said a little later about unzoned areas, but this is only uses in zoned areas, if I'm reading that correct. So I want to, if that's clarified. So I've got more. So next question has to do with, has section 405 been updated? You know, because I don't know, my information on it is pretty old. And if 405 on the review, I feel that review criteria is totally inadequate if it gets down that line, down that path. I'm not able to find a statement of need for this as a land use. I'm thinking of this as, if you will, a land use, because that's what it is, and it has certain impacts. And therefore, I think the zoning needs to say not only what the need is, but also what Bert Caldwell recommended in terms of an appropriate intent statement if you're moving forward. I think he had a good one for you. For special exceptions in 807, way back there, and I don't know if that's been amended either in the recent past, okay. There are no actual standards. So if it goes past this first level of review as a land use and it goes to a special exception, I have no idea how, you know, the next level of review, if you will, I want to throw those out as kind of technical questions before later on I'll get into the why I think maybe this is a good idea or not as a land use. Thank you.
Vince, is it okay to go ahead and answer some of those?
Okay. Vince.
I haven't done an acreage calculation and I don't have the map up in front of me right now, but my recollection of the locations of the existing industrial zones in the county are the Bonner Mill site out in Bonner Milltown area. There's some around Reserve and Mullen, then along West Broadway and out towards the airport and around the Y. There's a few small pockets down on Highway 93 South on the riverside, very small, they're already developed. So in terms of acreage, I couldn't tell you, but those are almost exclusively the only locations of the current existing industrial zones. And you asked, you know, does it only apply where it's zoned? And the answer to that is no. This is an overlay in the county that applies countywide, much like our nuclear free zone, and we have another zone that is similar. And so the requirement countywide would be, if you want to do crypto mining, you have to zone industrial. And so one of the stepping stones to getting to be able to get a permit to do crypto mining in Missoula County anywhere, whether you're zoned or not, is zoning to an industrial zone. And it would have to be supported by the growth policy, which we have an updated, 2016 updated 2019 with a land use element within that area where our current zoning is. And that's going to tell us where those appropriate industrial locations are. We are working on outside of that boundary and, growth policy and land use map for outside of that area. We may have some land use recommendations outside of it, or we may not. But ultimately, anywhere that's currently unzoned could not do a cryptocurrency mine. They would have to find an appropriate location that would be able to be successfully zoned industrial by the county commissioners. And I want to also clarify that once you meet the criteria of being zoned industrial anywhere in the county, you then, as a crypto mine, must be reviewed as a conditional use. And you referenced section 405, which contains those standards for what a conditional use must do. And that requires, and I'll just read a few of them. They're in the staff report, but for a few people who on this meeting who may not know. But Dave, I will also acknowledge, you're right. It has not been updated in a very long time. It is part of our update and I don't want to get the too confused, but we have another process concurrent with this that's updating our county zoning that will improve these standards. But right now, any use that is a conditional use in any zone, in any industrial zone, has to provide a 10-foot landscape buffer, cannot exceed allowable noise levels based on time of day, cannot produce lighting that has glare or is directed off site, must have a direct access or indirect access across other commercial or industrial properties to a designated arterial. Outdoor storage must be screened in the light industrial district. Only caretaker residences are permitted on site. And so they must all meet those minimum design standards. As I mentioned with our county zoning update, that's going to improve, I think. If a crypto mine meets all those requirements, is an industrial zone, meets those conditional use standards, but they happen to want to locate within 500 feet of a residence or a residential zoning district boundary, they then must go to the Board of Adjustment for a special exception review, which you referenced in Chapter 8, which also has not been revised significantly anyway in the last couple decades. Again, we are looking at hopefully making some good improvements to that through our zoning update. That does have review criteria that the Board of Adjustment can evaluate. What are the impacts on wildlife? For example, if there were vibrational impacts from the cooling fans that might affect wildlife that can be demonstrated, or anything like that, that would be part of the testimony that the board could consider, along with comments from neighboring properties about what the impacts may or may not be. The board can then decide this is just not the best place for this to go because of the residents in the area will be too impacted by this. We're kind of working within the framework we have right now. And the hope was that this was actually going to be folded into our zoning update that we are working on right now. That was all this time has been the plan, but with the deadline approaching for April and everything kind of going haywire with our scheduling on the zoning, we had to move this forward to meet that deadline. So it doesn't feel like it quite jives quite the way we want it to, but ultimately we are hoping to get there. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Thanks.
Josh.
Hi, good evening. I had 3 questions. The first one is, are these operations big employers? What's the positive economic impact locally? That's the first question. The second question is, do we have any information on what the energy consumption per Bitcoin mined over time is? I think one of the callers alluded to market increase in efficiency in terms of energy consumption per unit produced, for lack of a better word. So that's the second question. And then the third question is, have we done any investigation into the difference between proof of work and proof of stake validation techniques of blockchain transactions? I guess I don't understand it that well, but does it make sense to differentiate in the language of the zoning between proof of stake and proof of work, given that my understanding is proof of stake is much less energy demanding, much more efficient, but could still be interpreted as mining, even though I think the proper nomenclature is validators. Sorry, that's a mouthful. I can go back and repeat them if you need to.
All excellent questions, and I think we have answers to all of them. And I will, Diana probably has a lot that she wants to add to this, but I will tell you that we did contemplate calling the zoning district the proof of work blockchain zoning district because we recognize that difference of proof of work versus proof of stake. And we are really just looking at proof of work, which is what the cryptocurrency mining activity falls into. This zoning district will not at all affect proof of stake operations, even proof of stake cryptocurrency mining. It's not even mining, so it doesn't fall into this zoning. And I think at this point, before I get people way too confused, I'll see if Diana wants to help clear things up.
Yeah, I can certainly address the last question, and you might have to refresh my memory about the others. Sorry about that. But in terms of proof of stake, that is something that we looked into and discussed with the commissioners in some of the earlier hearings. Is that important distinction? And I talked in this presentation, I think, about the fact that not all blockchains use the proof of work system. There are alternatives. The most commonly used alternative is the proof of stake. And I haven't seen any characterization of that as mining. And so that's why we felt pretty confident that the regulations as they were written with the reference to cryptocurrency mining would be targeting, again, the proof of work system, because, staking or, validating, it's not a mining process. It uses a small fraction of the computational capacity of the energy, a very small fraction compared to proof of work, because again, the proof of work means literally like proof of putting in that money, putting in that computational capacity. That's you're proving that you've done that to participate. Proof of stake is just proving that you own, that you have a certain stake in that cryptocurrency. And so you don't, one computer is fine. You don't need to have 20,000 of them operating. So again, I haven't seen any reference to that process as mining. So that's why I feel like that would be not addressed by these regulations, essentially. And again, I'm sorry if there were other questions. Jenny may remember them, but I know you had a couple of previous questions. Go ahead, Jenny.
So the second question that Josh asked was, do we have any indication of energy consumption per Bitcoin mined, as was alluded to in the numbers? I think that Jason talked about the terawatt hours only increasing slightly when value doubled and transactions doubled. And I know that we have a really hard time tracking energy use because that information is generally private. And we have, as you've even heard in this public hearing tonight, varying numbers and different comparisons that make it really hard to be able to give you a concise number that this is how much energy is used per Bitcoin. But Diana, do you have any information to add to that? Energy consumption per Bitcoin mined?
I don't have a number like ready to provide to you. I do think as part of especially the Cambridge, University of Cambridge program that estimates energy consumption. I don't want to try to dig into those numbers right now live on the phone here, but I think that we could come up with their best estimate of that. It's important to note, and I think Jason alluded to this as well, that in terms of per Bitcoin mined, that changes over time for a lot of reasons. One is that the reward that miners get from validating, from winning that competition and getting to add that next block to the blockchain, that halves. It gets cut in half every 210,000 blocks that are added to the blockchain, which is approximately every 4 years. That just happened this past year. It's now at, I believe, 6.25 Bitcoins is the reward for doing that. It started out at 50 Bitcoins, I believe, when Bitcoin started in 2009. So that's one reason, as an example, and you're probably aware of that when you're thinking about energy consumption per Bitcoin mined, the amount, the reward that you get in Bitcoins drops over time. And will eventually, it'll drop lower and lower until it's pretty much zero and all the Bitcoins have been mined. So that won't happen for quite some time.
And then the last question was number of employees. And the county, to my knowledge, doesn't really track that. We don't have that as a data, a set of data that we can pull from to let you know what we have is information that the company that was in Missoula had provided us, and I don't want to misquote, but my recollection was somewhere around the number of 25 employees, but I don't know if that was here in Missoula or if that included other headquarters or other different satellite operations. I'm not really sure. So I think that is something that has been brought up frequently at the public hearings is how much employment do these operations provide? And we really don't have strong, facts to provide in that area. That's more something that the operators would have to provide that information.
Jason Vaughan is on the call still. Maybe he can answer that.
Public comment, I think we'll keep it to us for now. David, if you have some questions.
I do have a question. Is the fundamental public concern here the energy that's being used, this scale of the energy that's being used in these operations? And if so, then why are we writing it for a particular kind of industry? Maybe this is a dumb question, but couldn't it easily be servers that come in, the iCloud and all this stuff we're all using? This video is going to go up on a cloud and be in a server somewhere. And so shouldn't it be more, if the fundamental interest is the energy use, shouldn't the primary zoning focus around how much a new facility will use? Is that crazy? Or
no, that's how awesome that question is you went through for what for me was about 4 months of thinking and analyzing, and all of the span of an hour. So and we did look at, should we apply this to all users over a certain amount of energy consumed, and all kinds of, we met with different county staff people, energy providers, talked to them. We went up to the tribes. We did a lot of investigating and really came to the conclusion that there is no way, although we definitely explored ways to find ways to get people to report to us how much energy their businesses use. And we just could not get there. And we did finally conclude that was okay because of the huge difference in the amount of energy that the largest industrial non-cryptocurrency mining industrial user in Missoula County is using versus what the company at that time which was Project Spokane Hyperblock was using. And it's not just them. Any crypto mine who's doing mining, proof of work, is going to use that much greater amount. I would also mention that it is not just energy. That is a big piece of it that the commissioners have asked to explore and mitigate. Other issues that cropped up and that also have cropped up in other areas are noise due to fans, and that did become an issue here, which was addressed, but it was out of the a magnanimous approach by the company who was here, who took the initiative to make that change. We could not require it, and the citizens out in that area were really suffering. And if you even just listening on that video, that gives you any idea, not just of decibels, but that vibrational, which some people are very sensitive to, that tone. Also, aesthetics, because they, as Diana mentioned in her presentation, they are often in warehouses. There's usually, obviously no windows. no aesthetics to fit into a neighborhood, is why we've focused these on industrial areas and separated from residential areas. And then also e-waste was identified as a pretty significant problem, or at least significant potential problem that, if not addressed, would be a problem. And although I think here in Missoula it was being addressed, but we couldn't require it, and that's another step that this zoning is taking. And then ultimately, other localities around the U.S. have looked at, as was mentioned in the video, impacts on the energy supply systems, which wasn't identified in Missoula County as being much of a problem, nor fire safety, because the fire safety issue really crops up more for the small mom and pop, small potatoes kind of user in their basement or their garage, and they may not have electrical to code that can handle that load. And so you were seeing fires happen in homes or sheds or garages. We weren't too concerned about that at this scale. So we looked at a really wide range of impacts. Energy kind of rises to the top for some, because climate change is just such a prevalent topic right now. And the county is working hard to take responsible steps as far as a government, but is also looking at those users that are also making impacts countywide, that they have some ability to rein it in to a level that everybody else is using it. That makes sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wonder if there's any, like, it's still sort of, I like the concept of requiring new high energy users to provide, all of their energy through renewable energy. I like that concept in here, but I'm having trouble like fitting that in with like just singling out Bitcoin, because couldn't it be a server farm? I mean, people on this call probably know more about those than I do, but I guess it just seems like a very particular part of the whole electronics scene.
We did, at the commissioner's request, explored energy use by data centers, particularly, I want to say Pineville, Oregon, and Google and Facebook. And the energy consumption figures that we got were not comparable. It just wasn't on the scale. And so, and it was tricky back in 2019, 2020, when we had a current user and we said, all right, what you're doing right now, you do not have to comply with the renewable energy. Any new expansion or addition had to comply with that renewable energy requirement. But now that it seems like it's at a clean slate for Missoula County, and there are no cryptocurrency mining operations, anything new that comes in after the adoption of these regs, if that happens, would have to comply with that.
I might just add, Jenny, to your comment related to data centers. This comment or question there, in terms of the comparison that we did, we were specifically trying to gather information on energy used per square foot. I want to clarify that when you look at the total energy consumption of a large data center, a large Facebook data center or something, it certainly is comparable to a cryptocurrency mining facility. Some of those, as you can imagine, do use a heck of a lot of energy. What was really hard to get, and we didn't try to present this information because we didn't feel like we could find information we felt really confident in, was that energy used per square foot. We found some indications that you're likely to see significantly higher consumption per square foot in a cryptocurrency mining facility because of the way, like I talked about, you're, just looking to maximize the number of computers that you can squeeze into the area, basically, and not looking to maximize their lifetime or their uptime. But again, I don't want to, I can't really provide any of that information because we just didn't find enough that we felt confident in those energy use per square foot comparisons. It's really hard to get data on that. So I just want to clarify that, but certainly data centers can use a lot of energy too.
Thank you.
Shane, you're up.
Thanks. Jenny, you just answered one of my questions about if there were any existing cryptocurrency mining operations in Missoula County. So thanks for that. I did want to ask a question about the Bonner Mill cryptocurrency mine as it existed a couple of years ago.
Shane, are you still there, or did I cut out? I think we lost Shane.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yep, you're back.
So, sorry. So I guess my question is, what was the Bonner Mill cryptocurrency mine? Was that okay at the time that it was operating? So like the sound levels that it had originally produced, was that an allowable amount of sound? And then when they replaced their fans and that was over and above the current regulations, is that correct?
Yes.
And so like if somebody were to install a cryptocurrency mine now, we could expect that under the current zoning regulations that we would get the same amount of noise that mine had originally produced?
We could, because there are no regulations right now to necessarily prevent it.
I mean, in my mind, that's kind of a big deal, because that was like, I think that I heard many people up there, neighbors, saying that was their main concern. And I'm worried about the fact that that's an allowable amount of sound coming out. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't be pointing to if we need to update that regulation before we do anything here, because that's really to a detriment of the public, in my mind.
This zoning regulation does that.
Okay.
So it subjects cryptocurrency mining operations to a noise level. It's based on time of day. And given that it's within an industrial zone, it's going to be allowed during middle of the day to produce a decibel level comparable with other industrial type uses. I mean, it's in the neighborhood of, let's see, 60, 70 decibels, and in heavy industrial up to 80 decibels. So by adopting the zoning regulation as we've proposed it here today, cryptocurrency mining would be subject to those noise levels. Whereas when Hyperblock Project Spokane first went in, they were not subject to that. So we're trying to accomplish, I think, what you're wanting us to do.
Okay, so the sound levels have been updated since they originally went in?
Yeah, I mean, so it's complicated, and I'm happy to explain it, to explain the detail to you. But what I'm trying to do without getting into those weeds is to let you know that by adopting the zoning, there will be noise, a maximum noise generation amount for all cryptocurrency mines in Missoula County. Whereas right now, there isn't necessarily. It's a very dependent, site-specific dependent situation. And we don't want it to be variable. We want it to be uniform and fair and consistent and understandable. And that's what the zoning does that we're proposing. You might have frozen, Shane, I'm not sure, but when you get back, I'm happy to go into more detail. Vince, you let me know also if you want me to go into that detail.
Thanks, Jenny. I think we got Shane back. Shane, did you catch the end of that, or did you want to follow up with another question?
I caught it all, and I don't think that I'm understanding the details of it, but that's fine. Thanks for the explanation.
Great, we'll move on to Tung. You've got the floor.
Yeah, I was just curious why staff is recommending that this become a permanent addition versus was there consideration about extending it temporarily? Is there value in keeping it temporary? Because clearly there's still a lot of questions, and so does another year give us more time and as the industry evolves?
That's a great question, and it's a very simple answer. State law only allows for adoption of interim zoning for a period of 1 year and then a possible extension of 1 additional year, both of which the county commissioners have exercised. So, and that's because interim zoning is intended to address, an emergency, and the emergency at that time was new information that we had not been aware of previously, that if we left unaddressed, the commissioner's obligation to protect public health and safety would not have been met. And they did that in April of 2019 and renewed it again in April 2020. It expires April 3, 2021. Either they adopt it permanently because they, through this 2-year process have determined that what they wanted to accomplish worked, or they let it expire.
Micah.
I was curious how this zoning overlay proposal compares to, you mentioned other places have put regulations in place. I know you did some research into that, but is this based off of other places? Have other places done it differently? Can you just speak a little bit to that?
I will address that briefly, and then I think also Diana could add to it. The piece that I can probably clarify is the zoning that we researched together as we were developing the interim zone and over the couple of years to get to this point. We have not encountered a zoning district like this anywhere in the United States. There are other zoning districts that are concerned about other things. They're concerned about the aesthetics. They're concerned about the noise. They're concerned about the fire safety and deal with those issues through zoning. The way Montana law is structured, we cannot deal really with building permit type things through the zoning. And so there are also utilities that either on a short term or a longer term basis, some even I think in Montana, if I recall correctly, that put a moratorium on cryptocurrency mining so that the utilities could kind of catch up their service and figure out their service provision in a way that was safe and reliable. Diana might be able to speak a little more to that, but I guess to answer your question as succinctly as possible, we did not base this off of anything other than we didn't base this off other community zoning regulations. We did use the state law definitions of what is renewable energy, and we used other guides from, let's say, the corporate world of how they're managing their renewable energy requirements.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I can add a couple of things to that. I think in terms of, and this was on the slide, Jenny, I think that you showed in terms of locally here in Montana, Flathead Electric Co-op was one of those utilities or electric co-ops in that case that did put a moratorium temporarily on cryptocurrency mining back in 2018 or something like that because they were concerned about the impacts that it was having and could have on their system. And in terms of the energy requirements, the kind of renewable energy requirement part of this, I am not aware of any other jurisdiction that has put a similar renewable energy type requirement on cryptocurrency mining. There are jurisdictions that have established similar requirements for other industries that similarly have high energy use. I think one example that we looked at was, I believe it was Boulder, Colorado, and Boulder County that puts a renewable energy requirement on marijuana grow facilities, and so that was because they were concerned with that industry growing rapidly about the high energy consumption there. So that was an example we looked at in terms of a similar type of requirement, but for a different industry.
But we should look at that because that's coming.
Yes.
Marijuana growing is a high energy user.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And like I said, Neva, we were hoping that this would our plan was for this to be more holistically folded into the zoning update, where we are also looking at dispensaries and grow operations. This has a more immediate need because there's an expiration date out looming, but it is setting the stage, and we are taking into account other high energy users with our new zoning update.
Well, Jenny, since you mentioned that, could I make a motion, Vince, and move us along? Or do we have more questions? Oh, Sean's got one.
Yeah, thank you, Neva. Hold that thought. Once everyone's had a chance to ask their questions, I'd love to have a motion from you. Sean, you've got the floor.
Thank you. And I think this will be quick, folks. So I'm just curious if staff knows what part of the zoning that was so damaging to the company out in Bonner. Like, they accredited, their bankruptcy to the zoning coming out. And I'm curious if you guys have a sense of why, like, what about the zoning crushed their business? And then I'm also, this is kind of an opinion question, but from what I'm hearing from them, the company that was in Bonner, I'm sorry, I don't know their name, is that they are seeing this as an insurmountable hurdle for them. Like, this zoning creates an insurmountable hurdle for them. And I'm curious if this is going to make an insurmountable hurdle for the industry. Like, are they going to be able to come in and meet this renewable energy condition reasonably? Is that something that, folks that want to do this can come in and do? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
I'll jump in and just real quickly, I'll say the first question, neither Diana nor I are going to be able to answer, and that's a question for Hyperblock, Project Spokane people to address, how the zoning impacted them to the point where they felt like they couldn't operate. I think that's a really great question. And then the second question, which I didn't write down and is immediately left to me, remind me, because I had a good answer for it.
Just about whether this is going to be an insurmountable hurdle for other industries coming in, the same Bitcoin mining.
So we have had inquiries from other people interested to do crypto mining, and we've shared with them these regulations because they are in place right now. Nobody's doing it, so I can't say for sure what the feasibility is. But when we've shared this with others who want to do this type of industry in Missoula County, we've heard from them that is not insurmountable. That is, I almost want to say anecdotal in the sense that I can't. That's just somebody saying something. Oh yeah, I can do that. But they did go to the extent of, and Diana, you're going to have to help me with the lingo here, hiring a consultant, a renewable energy consultant to help them determine how to meet that requirement.
Yeah, I think he was a renewable energy broker maybe that they brought in to the conversation. And I guess just to add to that, sorry, Jenny, I don't want to cut you off. Were you? In terms of the, I think most of the feedback we've heard anecdotally is that the renewable energy requirement is the most challenging part of, I believe, of the requirements here for firms to meet. And I didn't go into sort of those 5 pathways that we had identified that a firm could meet them. I do want to acknowledge that it isn't an easy box to check. It's not, like you just make a phone call, sign up for something, and check you met that renewable energy requirement. It definitely takes some legwork. The city and the county both right now, for example, one of those pathways we identified that we're hoping will be a real great viable option in the near future, but isn't today, is a green tariff. The city and county are working closely with Northwestern Energy to try to get a green tariff going, which then would be an option for others, cryptocurrency mining operations and anyone else, as well as the city and county ourselves, to participate in and to get new renewables brought onto the grid that way. So that's one example where we're doing a bunch of legwork there that I hope, will help. Ultimately, it isn't the only way that firms could meet this requirement. Again, it would require them to put in substantial effort to figure it out, but we don't believe it's insurmountable.
Great, thank you.
This is maybe a stupid question, but I mean, it's more expensive to purchase renewable energy than from Northwestern, correct?
I would say not necessarily is the answer to that. Again, there's not kind of a real easy side-by-side comparison to do, because it isn't that just a quick phone call you make or a box you check. And so it really would depend on the details of, which pathway you're following, who you're working with. The cost of wind and solar can be really quite low these days. That the energy cost of wind and solar can be super low. But again, there's a lot of details that would go into determining what's the actual contract price that you would enter into. And we don't know, for example, yet with the green tariff we're working on with Northwestern, is there going to be a price premium associated with that to people who participate, or is there going to be a cost savings, or is it going to be pretty much, the same as what you'd otherwise paid in Northwestern? Those details are really yet to be determined, because there's so much that goes into answering that question.
And it changes.
Do we know? Sorry. Go ahead, Jenny.
I just adding, and it changes over time.
Do we know if there's capacity that exists for a company to purchase the amount, a cryptocurrency company to purchase the amount of energy that they need through the renewable energy market?
Well, I may be, please correct me, Vince, if I'm misunderstanding your question with my answer here. Because it's a requirement for new renewables, it's not really a question of what's the capacity out there that's already been developed for them to purchase from. It's a question of, through their actions. There's certainly the wind resource, the solar resource in the state is tremendous. And so it's not like we're going to, run into that as a limit. But in terms of the capacity of what's already been developed, I think that's sort of the wrong question to ask, just because it is a requirement for ensuring that new renewables come onto the grid.
So we don't know exactly how much each project would cost to meet the requirement, but I think it's an important question, because if meeting this requirement doubles or triples the cost of doing business for a company like this, that's different than increasing the cost by 10% or 20% or whatever. I mean, if it did turn out that the cost of complying with the requirement would be a huge increase, is there a certain threshold above which this would be unfair?
I think that's why Diana shared that slide that shows the was it 70 other companies who have found that it's not only feasible but profitable to do the additionality of the renewable energy, that all those, I can't remember how many all those different logos, that it is feasible, it is being done, it is profitable.
Okay, cool. So we're pretty, the feeling from staff is that it's possible to meet the requirement. It's probably going to be more expensive. Not sure, but it's not something that's insurmountable. It's just going to be something that's new and different. I get that.
And I guess I want to just add that in the limited conversations that I've had with others about this and the renewable energy brokers, I have to assume that by having that conversation and being told by those professionals that they can do this, or that they think that this is feasible, we have to rely on that. That's the information that we have, that others think that it's feasible. Some may feel like it's not. I guess it depends on what your goals are, what your objectives are. But
great, thank you. Andy, you're up, and then Josh will be after him.
Thank you. I guess I'll circle back on some of that conversation we were just having. I think this renewing this and creating this regulation is probably inappropriate. I think it's rushed at the 11th hour, although we've had 2 years to work on it. I think it's targeting a specific use and not targeting a specific problem that's concerned about noise, the energy use being one of them. I think there is some misappropriate application on very targeted industry versus the overall concerns. I don't think it should have been imposed in the first place. I think a good business was lost because of those regulations that came in. I think a good neighbor was in place. They were doing things to mitigate those concerns of the neighbors. They were purchasing, as I understand, power at increased cost to satisfy that they didn't need to do. And we heard tonight that, there's another main staple out there in that industry that's turned that mill site around. We already ran a mill out and lost a mill, that they're on the brink. And if you pull out more and more and add those regulations on it, I don't think you're helping promote that kind of continued development of a site that there's a lot of money, a TIF district's being worked on out there and other things. So I really think it's a targeted approach to a Bitcoin industry and not a global approach. And I think that's concerning. We talked about this energy consumption, and there's all kinds of things. And a good one that was just brought up is the medical marijuana. We all want better internet, faster cell phones, 4G, 5G. We always want more and more, and that's going to have an energy cost to it. And coming into this industry and saying you need to go create this new energy, it's my understanding through this process that was the ultimate killer of those guys, is they couldn't even do it. It was undoable, unattainable. So they're putting a requirement on it that I think is largely unattainable. We heard tonight that other communities, no one's done this. Putting that and strapping it here to say, we're going to find this good idea to go put, you need to offset 100% of your energy consumption with not only new, renewable, but create new, is a business model you've put on someone. It's hard enough to get a business out of the ground anyway. And to now go say, you need to go raise a dam, you need to go put more turbines up. You're making this business go run 3 other businesses so they can run their staple. I think if it goes forward, you effectively will just stop any Bitcoin in anywhere, and that will be the end of it. I don't think you're going to see it. So if that's the objective, I think that's what that does. And I think it's targeting. And, I think the zoning could be addressed if it was needed. I think you could impose things like visual, fire, public safety, noise. I think those things were tolerable and attainable. But this number 4 condition about the 100% of offsetting your footprint with renewable new energy, I think is a killer. I think they stop, they go away. And it's my understanding that that's exactly what happened at the Bonner site. They purchased more expensive hydro power. They put in fans. They did things to mitigate, but that number 4 condition was the death. And to come in now after 2 years, and we've heard a lot of concerns about, and Eva brought up about if it's energy, it's not broad enough. It's very targeted to an industry, and I don't think that's fair. So that's all I got.
Okay. Josh, unless staff, do you have want to respond?
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry, on my second round of 3 questions again. So if you just entertain.
No, it's great, Josh, please.
It's kind of piggybacking on Andy's and some other comments made previously. I'd be really interested to know, and this is delving into their business model, but what percentage of, operational expenditures or what percentage of revenue does their electricity cost represent? I mean, I know we saw a lot of logos on there from Google and other tech players. I mean, those guys operate at 85, 90% gross margins. So it's difficult to, make a comparison. I think they have a lot of leeway in terms of their business model to invest in renewable energy. So that was my first question. My next question was, is there a precedent of imposing these type of zoning overlays for other specific industrial activities, or would this be a first? Is there anything like this for anything else in Missoula County? And then I guess I'm a little concerned that, if we impose these zoning regulations, that somebody's just going to jump across the county border and come to the Bitterroot or up to Granite County or somewhere else and plug into Northwestern Energy, and we haven't solved any problems. So, yeah, those are the three this round.
I can jump in and answer a little bit. It might take a kind of a group effort to answer these questions, but as far as, I guess I'll go a little bit out of order. The question about, is there a precedent for kind of targeted zoning? And yes, there is, in a couple of ways. As far as specific uses, Missoula County has a zoning district called the nuclear zone, which regulates specifically nuclear facilities, nuclear energy facilities. State law, as well as Missoula County zoning, also regulates mining, gravel mining, gravel extraction as a specific industry. So yes, I think that the concerns about the targeted approach aren't consistent with how zoning works. Now, we're not trying to target a specific business, but industries and classes of uses are exactly what zoning is for. The second question, which was electricity cost as a percent of operating cost, those are numbers that we could never get out of cryptocurrency mining operations. Of which there were more than one at the time. So it's not like it was just the one company, but I don't have that information. And then I guess the other question about them, I don't even know what the question was about. Will they go elsewhere? That's hard to say. We've kind of had to decide as a county what our growth policies are, what our guiding principles are for development in Missoula, and just address those. We can't really affect or influence in any significant way what's happening in other counties, but maybe a model. Maybe get some feedback from others that, oh, here's a better way to do this. We've always been open to that. We've researched across the United States and across the world where there are other crypto mines being installed. What are they doing? Some places welcome it, and Missoula has just decided these are impacts to the environment and to citizens that we want to mitigate. And I guess it would also, what I want to mention about your first question on the electricity use, and I just want to remind you as you're kind of thinking about, did this zoning force them out of business? I can't answer that. They'll have to answer that for themselves, and I think they have answered it. But where I get kind of confused by the response is, yes, it did, is the zoning that was adopted in 2019 and 2020, the interim zoning, did not apply to their existing operation. So that's the best I can answer that first question, I think.
Micah.
I, of course, can't say that I know all the details, but I remember when the statement came out from the companies that they had ceased operations, and it was not mentioned that it was because of any zoning. And I know that there are other unsettled debts attached to the previous company that was out there. So for me, I'm looking at this at, on its merits and not based on what a company said or didn't say about what caused them to go bankrupt. Because at the same time, this the value of the rate of Bitcoins was halved, the price was down. So I think there's a lot of other extenuating factors. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Micah. I want to ask a question. I mean, what if in the future that cryptocurrency mining becomes more energy efficient? Is that possible, or is that or is this something that you think is not a possibility, or are you all planning to revisit this over time?
I think that's a great question. I sorry, gathering my thoughts here. I think that what it really gets to, though, is that the whole purpose of cryptocurrency mining is to demonstrate that you've put in a big investment of money and by extension of electricity. And so if a particular machine gets more efficient, that enables the operation to buy more machines to be able to compete, at that higher level and win the race more frequently. So I guess I feel like efficiency here, unlike in most industries where the purpose is to, provide lighting or provide, heating or other services where you want to do that for as little energy as possible. In the case of cryptocurrency mining, the whole purpose is kind of to use the energy. Again, that's the proof of work. And so that's where I feel like efficiency is sort of a less useful metric than it is in any other sort of energy use.
That's really helpful, Diana. Thanks. Yeah, I can see what you mean. If they become more efficient, they'll just add, the business model as such, they just add more computers to use more power. I just want to be clear, on the issue that a lot of folks have been raising, this issue of addressing this industry specifically rather than the impact that we're most concerned about, which is energy use. Was that solely because was that an administrative problem? Did I understand that correctly? That if you thought you were able to adequately understand the energy use of different industries that apply for occupancy permits, that you would have set a threshold at a certain point, but you didn't think you'd be able to do that? Is that correct, or was it not solely an administrative issue and you felt like cryptocurrency needs to be singled out because of its unique characteristics?
I think for us it was both. As much as we looked at the feasibility of setting a threshold, and first of all, getting that information, you cannot get that information unless it's self-reported. We did look at, and I can't remember, it's been a while. We talked with a clerk and recorder about ways to look into self-reporting for energy use. And we had many meetings and discussed how do we do that, and ultimately determined we could not do that. We got to a point of, all right, if we could do it, we would explore it further. But since we can't get the self-reporting and the ongoing monitoring necessary, which would have to be self-reporting every year, and would it be, how do you pick who has to self-report? It just became this mess, and we became comfortable with, all right, this industry is so vastly different than others anyway. Like I said to Neva, you are all are going through our years-long process of struggling through all of these logic loops that we also did. So I just want you to know, we've been where you are, and it's not easy. And over time, can it improve? Can we improve it? Yes. Can we change it if it's not working? Absolutely. It's not, zoning is meant to be fluid, and we can change it. So hopefully that helps answer it a little bit.
Neva. And thank you for that answer, Jenny. That was helpful.
Can I make a motion, Vince?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a last call for questions. It seems like we're at that point.
Vince done within 3 hours for a change. That'd be nice.
Vince, this is Donna. Since Caroline Lauer, the city appointee, has recused herself, did you want to appoint the city alternate, Mr. Morrissey, as a regular voting member?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
I've got a quick question on that. Do we want to have Jim do it instead, since he's the county and this is a county issue?
That's a good question, Shane. It might be required that a city alternate fills in a city vacancy.
I'm just asking the question. Whatever is good.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I already have 4 regular members from the county, so I would think in this circumstance
The city.
The city.
Okay, great. So that stands. Shane will be a voting member in this. And so Neva, would you like to continue with your motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move that the Missoula County zoning regulations be amended as shown in Attachment A to add 2 new definitions, cryptocurrency mining and renewable energy, and to add a zoning overlay in section 5.005 regulating cryptocurrency mining countywide in the unincorporated areas of the county. And I'm, well, if I could get a second, then I'd like to speak to the motion real briefly. Then.
Great. Thanks, Neva. And is there a second for Neva's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Shane. So the floor is open for discussion. Neva, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I think I've been convinced through this conversation that, cryptocurrency mining is a very unique kind of industry and has unique impacts that this is a step in the right direction towards requiring hopefully other industries to move towards supplying their own energy. So I like that concept, as I said earlier. And I think, this is the kind of thing that if we don't pass this zoning regulation, we could be sorry later on that that this industry comes in and basically mars our quality of life substantially. So I think this is a reasonable regulation that addresses concerns that have been raised about energy use and noise, and it applies equally across the county as an overlay. So I think it's a reasonable proposed regulation. I plan to support it.
Thank you, Neva. Dave, would like to speak?
Yes, thanks. So I want to focus on 2 things if I can. One is, how does this land use meet or not meet the growth policy and guiding principles? And I had some problems, a whole bunch of problems, because in the findings, when I read through findings, and I'll just tick them off, 9, 14, 17, 18, 21, 28, 29, and 33, tell me it doesn't meet the growth policy. My next, what I'm thinking about and looking at when I try to look at this zoning proposal and this land use is the conclusions. Does the zoning promote the public health, safety, and welfare? And as a land use, it doesn't. So I would tend to vote no on the land use. And then I want to add one more thing. I think Neva's correct about if to the planning board, this is to the planning board folks here, if you want to move ahead and approve this, the staff report adequately and does well in isolating and corralling and identifying the issues and putting some parameters on it. It was well done as a staff report. I may or may not agree with the yes or no to the land use, but if you're moving forward to approve this zoning, yes, do the staff report. Don't eliminate anything and follow along with their suggestions. That's my pitch. Thank you.
Dave, for my benefit, what do you mean by the land use component?
Well, to me, the question is, okay, we're talking about a land use, and then what kind of zoning would work for this land use? The land use has already been determined as industrial, and the question is, should we focus in on this particular land use? And I think the simple answer is yes. It's a very unique one, just like sand and gravel mining or fat rendering plants or hog farms. They're pretty unique, and everybody has unique conditions and standards for those kinds of uses. And so if we move forward as a county, as a community. And in this, you should follow the staff recommended conditions on that. That's what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Would anyone else like to speak before we vote?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I still think that I have a problem with this, and I think that it does feel like it's just kind of a, to Josh's point, somebody could just move across the county line and still use the same amount of power. So, this doesn't seem like it's a zoning issue, and zoning in my mind is meant to buffer impacts on a specific site. And I think that this zoning, I think this does prevent impacts on the site, but it also then it goes beyond the site and starts to talk about electrical use. And noise mitigation and visuals and things like that all make sense to me in the zoning, but this electrical use, it doesn't seem like it fits to me, and I'm having some trouble rectifying that in my mind, I guess, because the same amount of electrical use is going to be used just somewhere else, and we get our electricity from hundreds of miles away. So does it really matter? Like, are there adverse environmental impacts here because of this? I think that the zoning is actually taking those environmental impacts out. And so then it just becomes a question of electrical use, and that remains unresolved in my mind. And I liked Neva's comments earlier about if we're actually concerned about electrical use and we're trying to zone out electrical use, then it should apply across the board over a certain threshold or something like that. I don't know how I'm going to vote, and I would maybe pose an amendment to the motion just to test it out, but I want to hear what other people have to say before I do that.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm going to support it. I have a lot of the same. I had a lot of the same reservations that were expressed by folks tonight, but I think we really poked this pretty hard, and I was satisfied by a lot of the answers that were given by staff, which weren't perfect answers, but it was clear that they've looked at what they can do through zoning to address this really immediate problem, and they've come up with the best solution that they think they can do. And I don't think it's perfect. In my ideal world, like I said, I think it makes a lot more sense to do what Neva and others suggested to address the impact that we're concerned with. To your point, Shane, I mean, it sounds like an issue, and the point that Josh made, I mean, this sounds like something that should really be addressed as a tax. It seems like a stretch for zoning in some ways, but at the same time, I was convinced by some of the arguments that it's not actually, this is something that's not atypical for zoning to address a unique type of use that has unique characteristics, which I think we heard tonight. Cryptocurrency mining certainly does. And if it was possible to make this a shorter term thing to account for the fast changing technology, I think it sounds like staff would have considered that, but we're restricted by state law, and on and on. It's not perfect, but I think it's an important issue that I think if we need to address. So I'm gonna vote for it. I didn't see who went first, but I'll go Sean. You're up.
Thanks, Vince. Gosh, sometimes I wish we had an easy one. I'm really torn about this too. This is hard because in essence, like, I think I support the idea of the energy use a lot. But the condition just seems so huge. And I'm struggling with the renewable energy condition. Like I see everything else and I support all of it. I even support the renewable energy condition to a certain degree, but it seems like a huge hurdle, to this industry. So I guess I'm wondering what Shane's idea is for an amendment, or if we could maybe add on a recommendation to like reevaluate this condition and what its possible impacts are, or if staff can just, like flush that out anymore. It sounds like they've, really run this through the ringer. So I'm not sure if that's possible, but that is definitely my hang up. And I don't know where I'm going to vote, but I think that's my number one hang up for this. That's what I got.
Thanks, Sean. I mean, I'll just throw it out there, Shane. I don't know if your idea was this, but I mean, it's possible to propose an amendment that removes support for a portion of the resolution. So if you wanted to propose an amendment that said you don't support condition 4, that would be germane.
Yeah. I just don't know. I don't know if I want to hear the result of a vote on it. I guess. So at this point, can I propose an amendment and then we vote on that, and then we would then vote on the whole thing? Is that the process?
Yeah. I know we could. Yeah, that would be the process. John had done some straw polls before. I don't really understand the process there, but if you want to just gauge support, Shane, and ask for a voice vote or something, I think we've done that before in the past. It might be awkward on Zoom, but
Or just say the idea. Let's talk about the idea.
Well, I guess the idea, and I'm not making a motion to amend yet, but the idea would be to strike condition 3 from the zoning, which requires that 100% of electricity consumed by the cryptocurrency mines would need to be new renewable energy. And it hurts me to say that, but it feels like a barrier to me in this instance.
I would not support that. I might say like go halfway or something, but to 0, I think it misses the spirit of this, which is we don't need businesses in our community that are going to use a ton of energy and come here just to do that and to take advantage of our community. Do we want to build an economy around Bitcoin? I don't. So, I don't see why we would let go all the way to 0 and let them completely off the hook. So I could go somewhere in between, but so anyway, that's my feeling on that motion. But
and I'm with you there. I'm with you, Neva. It just feels like anything in between 0 and 100 is arbitrary. So that's why I threw out the 0.
I don't know that it's so arbitrary, because what they're saying is new renewable energy, and that is a big hurdle. 100% renewable energy, and so I actually, that would be cool to apply it across the board. But I could also see that because this industry uses such an exorbitant amount, even more than like your typical data servers, then it's reasonable to require that at least some of their energy be, produced and compensated through renewables. Sorry, other people have their.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, I guess I'm a climate change believer. I understand that Missoula County is, probably already suffering from negative impacts of climate change. I just don't know that zoning is the right way to tackle this problem in Missoula County, or that it's going to tackle it at all. It's not limited to the site. Energy is purchased outside of the site. And so I just question what impact it's going to have on solving the problem. And I don't know how I'm going to vote, but I would struggle to support it in its current iteration. And I may propose, is there a way to offer an amendment where cryptocurrency mines must use 100% of renewable energy sources, of which X percentage must be new. 100% of new energy, renewable energy resources seems like a very high hurdle to me. That's why I'd like to understand the cost structure of these businesses. And I understand that that changes over time as the benefit for mining a new Bitcoin decreases over time. But that may help me get behind it a little bit more. It just seems punitive to a specific industry to me. And it doesn't feel to me like it's going to solve the problem. So for those reasons, I think I would struggle to support it in its current form.
Josh, would you support the amendment that Shane proposed to strike that requirement, which was number 3?
I think that goes maybe a little bit too far. I wouldn't strike it. I mean, I would strike maybe the word new.
Yeah.
I wouldn't strike out the entire piece. I think that, we need to at least hold them to renewable energy sources. That may be difficult to measure. I maybe would like to see something along the lines of 100% renewable energy resources, of which a percentage of that needs to be new.
Mm-hmm.
I would accept that friendly amendment.
I like the idea. I mean, like I said in my questions, I would, share a lot of these same concerns about it going a little bit too far and being exorbitantly cost prohibitive. But, we heard from staff that, it wasn't prohibitive, that it's possible to do this, and that it's, the amount of energy used by cryptocurrency is so far above and beyond what normal industry uses, and that it's tough to actually measure it. All that's to say is I would support something that brings it back a little bit. So, where are we here? Shane, did you make a friendly amendment, or Josh, did you, that Neva can accept? Was that
Can we hear from Andy as well?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Andy.
Yeah, let's just close this loop here. Okay, Andy, please.
I would be supportive of an amendment that would strike condition 3. I could possibly be persuaded to get onto the 100% renewable concept, but end with period. I think if you put any condition of the new as renewable, or it may be an issue, or it still may be a barrier. There's a certain cost. These facilities have megawatt capacities. They have capacities of their generation, their turbines. So if they need an uptick of 10%, you don't go to these people and say, oh, we want you to turn up 10%. Those are massive infrastructure problems that I'm afraid if they have to create new, they make a certain amount of electricity, whether it's the dam, the turbines, they're making a certain amount. There's a finite infrastructure that they produce. And if they're producing that today and they need to increase that capacity, those could be significant infrastructure projects you're putting on them again, even though you may say, I'm only asking them to produce 10% new. 10% new could be millions or billions of dollars of infrastructure to get that capacity up. So as far as I could go would just be striking, my preference would be striking 3 altogether, but a possible, potentially palatable would be just making it 100% renewable, period. Because I think that is options for them. And I think the facility did that in Bonner. I think they purchased the renewable energy because they could. The problem is, I think they couldn't increase it. They couldn't generate the new. And you're putting a ownership on someone that's outside of their business model. It's outside of their purview. They buy power. They don't make power.
Staff, could you address this? I mean, I think it came up in one of your presentation, that there might be impacts to just allowing what we're talking about, renewable energy, that it would shift the use or the costs across the state.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Vince. The reason that the draft that we're proposing includes the word new, like I talked about a little bit before, is the concern that when you have, again, a new large energy user come in and make use of an existing renewable source that was previously serving someone else, then the impact that you're having is just to shift those other users previously using that source onto some other source of energy. And there's no way to, really explicitly track all of that. And so to say, well, this is who was using it before, and this is what they're using now, and therefore those are the impacts. But there's certainly no way to guarantee that they're going to be shifted onto a renewable source. And that was the concern. Again, when you're talking about sort of small amounts of energy, those impacts aren't so big, of course. But when you're talking about a really large user coming in and using what was supplying many people or other businesses that are then being shifted onto another source, that's where that concern, I think, gets a little bit larger. So that was the rationale there.
Thanks for that, Diana.
Sorry to interject again. What about the idea of setting a threshold so it's not punitive to one specific industry, and then requiring to buy carbon credits to offset whatever they consume above and beyond that threshold? Is that a feasible idea or not?
Was that question directed at me? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
anybody who may know the answer, I guess.
Sorry, I didn't know if that was a staff-directed question or not. So just to make sure I understood, the concept is set a threshold, meaning a certain amount of energy consumption, and then require the purchase of carbon credits beyond that. Was that what you outlined there?
That's correct. And then it seems like, okay, any industry that exceeds a certain threshold is going to be required to, offset that by carbon credits. And then it doesn't apply just to cryptocurrency. It seems like it would be more equitable. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I can't say I've given it a lot of thought as a specific possibility, but I'll respond just with my thoughts in the moment here. One challenge in applying it across the board that Jenny explained is the administrative and kind of logistical challenge of how do you get access to information about energy consumption? How do you know who to ask, even, if you're requiring a certain, and I think, there are ways that there are disclosure ordinances, for example. I don't know, through zoning, I'm not sure, but there are local governments that do require reporting of energy consumption for facilities that are larger than a certain number of square feet, for example. So I think, that's something that certainly would be in the realm of possibility. It's clearly not something that Missoula or Missoula County is doing now. So that's the first question, is, needing to get that information. And then I think, there could be a requirement for energy consumers above a certain level to purchase potentially carbon offsets. That renewable energy certificates or RECs maybe would be a little bit more compatible there when you're talking about renewable energy versus a threshold based on carbon emissions. There are questions in both cases about how real are those, how real are carbon offsets, how real are renewable energy certificates in terms of actually making change in the world, actually resulting in additionality. So I think those are some questions that we would probably want to grapple with if we were to go that route.
Well, okay, just to follow up, presumably you would have to request from the miner their energy consumption in order to make sure that they're, investing in new renewable sources, correct, to the sufficient scale?
Yeah, I think the difference is that when you're talking about a particular industry, then you know who you're asking for that information, versus if you're, if it's a requirement that applies to any energy user above a certain level, how to identify who the people are to ask for the information is the challenge that we grappled with when we were thinking about it. Again, in terms of, you don't want to ask any business probably because you're looking for a threshold, but then how do you set that threshold exactly? And Jenny can jump in here if I'm not articulating this well, but not to say that it wouldn't be possible. It's just, it would be a challenge to identify and might, I think that some sort of disclosure requirement in terms of energy consumption would probably be needed to either in parallel with that requirement or or prior to that requirement.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Diana. Andy, is your hands up? Would you like to speak?
Is my hand. I will put it down. I've said all I have to say.
Okay, great. So Shane or Josh, would you like to make an amendment or have given all this discussion? Or Neva, it sounds like Neva thought a friendly amendment was taken on, I think, the comment to.
Well, I would
Let's just
be
clarify
happy to amend my own motion to strike the word new. And partly why I'm saying that, I think Diana made a reasonable argument about, well, they're just going to bump off the other renewable energy users. Well, you could also say, no, they're going to expand the market because there's going to be more demand for renewable energy. So I think it's kind of conjecture on that, right? So I'm okay with striking the word new, and I forgot who seconded, they have to approve it too. Was it Dave?
I seconded. And
what do you want to second
well,
that?
let's just be clear to make sure that this amendment was actually proposed. So Josh or Shane, whoever said that, is this the? I mean, I think we should vote on it too.
Yeah, maybe that's not the amendment you want. I don't know.
I was maybe going to take another straw poll, if that's okay.
No,
and
it's 9
just
o'clock. Let's go. Sorry, guys.
I just want to know what people would be comfortable with in terms of new renewables. Is there a threshold that people would be comfortable with? And I don't necessarily think that striking the word new is quite appropriate. And I agree that striking the whole paragraph is inappropriate, but is 25% or 50% appropriate? And does anybody have any sense in there where they would land if that was an amendment?
I would say low. I would be at 10% probably, Shane, around that area. And I would still want to require 100% renewable energy consumption, of which 10% would be new.
I wouldn't feel comfortable with a number, but if you made it a range that was to be determined by staff, I'd feel better. I mean, because I just don't have the information to say what makes sense, but to indicate in an emotion that, a range.
I would also be comfortable with no new renewable and just renewable.
Which is what I was suggesting.
Everyone else, would anyone else vote for an amendment of this kind that dramatically lowered the amount of new renewable energy required? Would there be any other positive votes? Thumbs or eyebrow movements? Okay.
I would vote for it if it had a range like you specified, Vince, that we established, that staff could then articulate further, because I agree it feels like we're making judgment on things that we don't have all the information that we would need.
I mean, by establishing a range, we're already making some judgments in my mind, unless the range is 0 to 100%.
When you set a range, you set the lower bar. I mean, let's be real. If it's 10 to 30, it's 10, right? I mean,
this whole thing is a judgment call. I mean, I think Shane, you said it right. I mean, any number is arbitrary. I think the challenge that we're all, at least I certainly am struggling with here, is that we're trying to advance an agenda with respect to energy policy through zoning, and I think that's a super difficult thing to do, and it's highly imperfect, and we've essentially targeted one particular industry because we happen to know at this point in time that it's a high energy user. And so, I'm inclined to support it as is, because I feel like the emergency that was raised was one of like, hey, this is using a whole lot of energy and we don't know what that means. And so this solves that. We're basically saying, okay, well then we're really pretty much not going to have Bitcoin mining in Missoula County. Anything between that, I think is again arbitrary. Like, if we require them to have a little bit more renewable here or maybe a little bit less, like that doesn't really solve the problem that we were trying to solve. So again, totally imperfect, but I feel like we need to kind of move forward here. So I'm kind of like, I agree with kind of what Shane was saying earlier, which is any number, any amendment, I think is essentially arbitrary.
So maybe I'll keep my original motion. Let's just vote on the motion that's on the floor.
Caroline and Dave, you've got your hands up here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
I wasn't sure if it's okay for me to speak at all as someone who's recusing myself.
Yeah, you can speak.
Okay. I've been biting my tongue a bit, but I agree it is arbitrary. If we're going to set a range that staff determines, why not go with staff's recommendation now? They have been putting several years of thought into it. And then to the point about regulating energy policy through zoning, while not common, it has been done in several other municipalities. Boston, Massachusetts, Cambridge, Massachusetts have done it. I believe some municipalities in New York. It is kind of a different approach, but it isn't the first time it's ever been done. So I wouldn't back away from it because you think, oh, this is a totally inappropriate use of zoning. So those are just a few other contextual things from across the country.
Thanks, Caroline. Dave, got a final comment here?
I would agree with Caroline. Even though I think that's an inappropriate land use, I think this is appropriate zoning. And I support what this, as I said, with the staff conditions, and they did a nice job at it, and they know a lot more about it than I do. And this will go to the county commissioners, and we're giving them lots of good feedback. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. All right, Josh and Shane, I'll give you a last chance if you want to try and craft something, given all the comments and feedback here. If you do, we'll put the amendment to a vote. If not, we'll vote on the original motion by Neva.
I guess I will make an amendment just to test it out, and that's simply striking the word new from, if I can find it here, paragraph C, section 3. So these facilities shall be required to develop or purchase sufficient, delete new renewable energy, blah, blah, blah. Is that enough to vote on?
Yeah, I think, is there a second? I think we need a second for your motion.
I'll second that amendment.
Great. Seconded by Josh. I think we should do a roll call here. Donna or Heather, could we do a roll call vote on the motion?
Certainly.
Thanks.
Andy Mefford.
Yes.
Andy Mefford votes yes. Dave Loomis.
No.
Dave Loomis votes no. Michael Sewell.
No.
Micah Sewell votes no. Sean McCoy.
Aye.
Sean McCoy votes yes. Josh Schrader.
Yes.
Josh Schrader votes yes. Caroline Lauer is abstaining. Neva Hassanen.
No.
Neva Hassanen votes no. Toon Pham.
Yes.
Toon Pham votes yes. Shane Morrissey.
No.
Shane Morrissey votes no. Vince Caristo.
Oh, sorry, no.
No. The motion fails. 4-5. Thank you.
Shane, you voted against your own motion?
Very interesting move, Shane. Well, thanks for doing that. Okay, we'll move on to the original motion made by Neva, which was recited in the staff report. And we don't need to recite the motion again, but we will be voting on the original motion to approve the motion as described by staff. So with that, Donna or Heather, could we do a roll call vote on the original motion again?
Certainly. Andy Mefford.
No.
Andy Mefford votes no. Dave Loomis.
Yes.
Dave Loomis votes yes. Micah Sewell.
Yes.
Micah Sewell votes yes. Sean McCoy.
Yes.
Sean McCoy votes yes. Josh Schrader.
No.
Josh Schrader votes no. Neva Hassanen.
Yes.
Neva Hassanen votes yes. Toon Pham.
Yes.
Toon Pham votes yes. Shane Morrissey.
Yes.
Shane Morrissey votes yes. Vince Caristo.
Yes.
Vince Caristo votes yes. Motion carries 7-2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana and Jenny.
Yeah.
That was a really great discussion. I learned a ton. I think everyone did. And as you said, I think we all went through a multiple years process here in just a few short hours. All right, so we will move on. There's a couple other items on the agenda tonight that are important. We don't have any communications or special presentations. We should not do. Were there any committee reports? Did the TPCC meet, Shane?
Yeah, the TPCC met this afternoon. And just a quick report, we elected president or chair and vice chair. We reviewed some of the, I guess they call it Amendment 3, the transportation improvement of the transportation improvement program, basically just change orders to jobs that are happening in and around our infrastructure. So we reviewed all that. And then there was a little piece of discussion involving removing certain bits of streets from the urban system, and I won't get into details on that, but it was a general discussion of kind of the urban streets in Missoula and how those are funded and what adding or removing streets from that urban streets plan does. And it was kind of specific to a project that might be coming down the pipe here pretty soon. So anybody have any questions? Do we need more of a report than that? Not really.
No,
sure.
that was perfect, Shane. It sounds like it was a substantive meeting. Yeah, are there any questions that folks have? Just feel free to speak them out if you do. Okay, seeing none, thank you, Shane, for that report. So 2 items of old business tonight. The first is electing the vice president for this year, 2021. We will, at this point, accept nominations for vice president. We discussed this last time. There weren't many enthusiastic takers, but we do need someone to fill in for me in the event that I'm not able to be here. And so I would accept
nominate
nominations.
Caroline?
Wonderful.
I will accept that nomination.
Okay.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline. Okay, so the nomination's been made, it's been accepted. I think that is totally fine. I don't think we need a second or anything. We'll just
sorry.
vote on. No, I'm speaking out loud. I think that's the correct way to do things.
I'll take a sec. I'll be second. I think you need a second, don't you?
Okay, yeah. So Shane nominates, Neva seconds, Caroline accepts, which I think should be a part of the process. If it's not, it needs to be.
After last meeting when it was pulling teeth for like 15 minutes to move forward.
Okay, well, and then just for sake, are there any other nominations for the position? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of Caroline serving as vice president, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, none opposed. Thank you for serving, Caroline, for this year. Look forward to working with you. Okay, the next item is committee member appointment to the TPCC. I guess, Shane, you attended this meeting as well in an interim role here. Would you like to assume the responsibility officially for the remainder of the year?
Unless there's some other takers, I will continue.
Okay, seeing none, I'll nominate Shane. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Sean. So all in favor of Shane serving as the TPCC representative for this year, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you very much, Shane, for serving. We'll look forward to your reports this year. Okay, there's no new business tonight. And the next section, if anyone would like to make a comment on anything at all, this would be the time. We'll give some time here for that to occur. Dave? You're on mute, Dave.
Finally. My question goes to process, and it has to do with our discussions. I have two examples. For instance, we had a discussion on a previous meeting about growth policy and consistency among ourselves. And the second one was a discussion on the last meeting where we had a zoning question on a subdivision that was 15 years old. I personally thought that the staff should have brought the context and information forward to begin with, so we're not left with this thing dropped in the middle of nowhere. I guess my question is, how does that information go back up to either staff and especially on policy back up to the commissioners? Is there a policy already set by the planning board? Because I'm kind of newish on this, less than a year. And how does that information get back to the commissioners, or is it up to staff to kind of bring these things forward? Is that I don't know if that's their assignment anymore or not. So that's my question. Where does it go from here?
Yeah, I can start off, and if staff or anyone else wants to fill in, please do. On the second point, so I brought it up with staff. We have meetings before each meeting where we talk about what's coming and what's happened next. And I did ask them, as I said at the last meeting, to come to us with some information on previously approved subdivisions that currently exist in Missoula County. So to come to us hopefully with some assessment of what's out there, which sounds like it might be hard to do, but also some of the legal questions surrounding that situation. Namely, is it even possible or legal to not allow zoning to have the zoning not allow the subdivision to move forward? Those questions came up at the last meeting. Hopefully, at the next planning board meeting is when we discussed having that as a staff report. So hopefully we'll get more information on that and have a discussion on those items on that point. More generally, things like the discussion that you mentioned, Dave, about consistency with planning board decisions in relation to the growth policy and how those ideas get filtered up to the commissioners. There isn't really a process in place. I mean, I think it's been discussed at several times in the past since I've been on the board for there to be regular updates to the commissioners, either from me or someone else on the planning board. That's something we could consider. And Karen looks like she's turned on here. I mean, I should say that, I think that we should all think of what we say at the meetings and what they're transcribed as in the notes as something that the commissioners look at. I think, I think that's what I'd say to that. So, Karen, if you want to jump in here, then we'll let the other folks respond. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
I
for
guess
joining us.
Hi, Karen Hughes, Missoula County Community and Planning Services. I guess I'd add to that I'm currently serving as kind of the staff liaison to the planning board for both the city and the county. Obviously, I work for the county, but when a city issue comes up, I try and alert city staff. And then in this case, it'd be more of a county project question. This is something that Vince raised with us at the pre-meeting, and we'll go back and look at the minutes from the last meeting, and Bailey is on the call as well, who was providing the staff report and staffing the last project. And so we constantly are making adjustments. So I think don't think that staff doesn't hear you. So if you have suggestions, it's good to have these sorts of conversations, and we pick up on them and try and make adjustments as we go. But if there's specific requests like this, then I'm usually the person who kind of, it funnels through me, and we kind of disseminate it and try and get back to you with whatever it is that you need. And that goes for if you need technical assistance, if you need a special presentation of some sort, or if it's more nuts and bolts sorts of stuff, or you want to have staff come in for a Q&A on a particular topic, or just want a brief report on one subject or another. We're happy to try and make that happen.
Great, thanks, Karen. Thanks for that. So it sounds like, I mean, this is a good forum, Karen, to kind of bring up some of those desires and questions.
Yeah, and if I'm not here, then Vince usually collects those, and we have a follow-up conversation about them. And just so you know, we're in the process of transitioning. I will be kind of phasing out in the next few months from this role, and Bailey will be phasing into it. So the county staffs the planning board. That's why you see the county staff doing this work, not the city staff. But like I said, we meet every month with city planning staff and talk about planning board as part of that.
And Karen, would you say that, because of the state law, public meeting requirements, it's actually preferred to raise questions of this sort at the meeting here rather than contacting you outside, or does it not matter?
An individual board member it's okay to have a conversation, or if you want to individually, if you have a follow-up, if you have a question for staff about something you see in their staff report, that's okay. It's always kind of good practice to let the rest of the board know if you have that kind of, not privilege, but it seems like privileged conversation, to be able to raise it in the meeting, to say, hey, I had a question about this. I contacted Bailey or Tim or whoever it was, and this is what I learned. That's good practice to put that on the record in your meeting so that everyone learns. And don't hesitate when you have questions in the staff report. And I haven't gone back and listened to the last meeting to hopefully raise some of them, and maybe not all the questions were answered, but don't hesitate to dive in there a little bit if you're like, I don't understand how you see how the comp plan compliance or the growth policy compliance argument works. You can feel free to dive in there. And I'm guessing you probably did,
But you're saying that can occur before the meeting if it needed to, and that would be totally germane.
Yeah, for an individual asking a point of clarification or just a quick question on the staff report, when you have the contact information for each case planner. It's best to raise it in the meetings, though, because then it's open, transparent, and on the record, and everyone gets it. A quick email to the individual saying, hey, I'm going to raise this at the meeting is always appreciated, so that we make sure we're getting you the best information and you're not getting it whatever on the tip of our toes.
Great, thanks for that, Karen. Yeah, I think these are important things to go through to, for the smooth operation of the planning board and working through issues appropriately. So Andy, you've got your hand up.
Sure, thank you. One of the things that I have noticed, and it was raised by a couple newer board members, is this consistency question. And it may be my only perspective, and it is just mine, but I have a concern that we've been very inconsistent as a planning board. And I could point to several projects specifically where we use a benchmark, Paramount, as an example. I could go back to the recent one, the rezone that was denied, and comments in there where zoning is paramount, land use growth policies are paramount. And then this board finds that projects that comply with zoning then don't meet a condition, effects on ag. We look at other projects that are trying to double down and increase density, but they're denied. The Grant Creek rezone is an example of that. I think there's been very inconsistent and alarming inconsistency, in my opinion, in this board. And that's concerning to me. I've heard comments about, the project that was denied at the Y for a rezone or recommended for denial, being close to public transit. I don't even get a comment like that whenever the closest bus, in concept gets to the airport, where the Grant Creek rezone, gets to Schrader Road or down off Expressway, much closer, where we built walking paths. That project had water, sewer, trails, transit. It had all the elements, and we can't find room to increase density. We go pick a project at the Y and say it fails to do those things, and we're wanting to see increased zoning when people show up against it. We claim it's close to transit. Those things are concerning to me. There's a lack of infrastructure there. I mean, there was a sewer pipe laid through that project that followed that subdivision alignment. It wasn't 2 months ago that subdivision come back before commissioners and got an extension to go forward with that project. We have right now a snapshot of the market. There was 33 single family homes on the market at under $1 million, with the average price being $700,000. So I just want to express, I don't feel the board has been consistent in imposing a lot of our decisions, and I think that's troubling.
Thanks for that comment, Andy. Yeah, I think it's an important topic for us to consider. I think, and this is the place to discuss it. So, I personally thought a lot about the comments from last week along these lines from board members, and trying to think in what ways, the 3 cases that were brought up last week, the Y, the Grant Creek case, and the East Missoula rezone case, how they were even comparable. And because at the end of the day, in some cases we approved the rezoning or we recommended approval, and in other cases we didn't. And I don't think just because in one case where we recommend, my conclusion is I feel like every case that I can think of has been different, and there's been a reason, at least I can speak personally, why I voted a particular way. And I think, if you just look at the vote outcome, yeah, they're different in those 3 cases, but personally, I felt like there were reasons why we voted differently. They were in different jurisdictions. 2 were in the city, 2 were in the county, 2 involved unzoned land. We can go on and on, but that's my big picture assessment. But yeah, I think it's we want to be consistent. So if folks are feeling that way or feeling particular issues, we need to talk about that, I think, and bring it up at this forum. Does anyone else have anything to say? All right. Well, if there's no other comments here, then thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned. All right, have a great night.
Thanks, Vince. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.